extremist. She talked about immigration. She talked about wokery in our institutions. She talked about net zero too and how it's strangling our economy.
She said that Britain is full of what she termed as secret conservatives, people who believe in the things that she believes in conservative ideas, but don't feel able to express those ideas in their place of work or in their social circles.
Yes, let us know what you make of what Liz Truss had to say there. GBViews at gbnews.com, because for a lot of people, they may not be listening. Of course, Liz Truss didn't last very long in the top job, but does she have some relevant things to say this time around? Are you listening? And do you think Rishi Sunak should be listening, or are you sick of this sort of competing conservatisms, competing versions of the same thing?
It's interesting.
And do you believe Liz Truss? Because I'm not sure I believe her when she talks about robust immigration controls, because she has considered liberalising visa rules in the past.
Well, I think she had a different view on legal migration than she did on illegal migration. But whether or not that's exactly where this new group sits, that's a question to be answered. But very interesting to hear in perhaps what was the most substantial post-prime ministerial speech that the shortest-serving Prime Minister of the United Kingdom has given after she resigned almost 2 years ago now.
Yes, I just scanned the inbox just then, and there's a division from you at home, very much. Some of you are great supporters, think she's the one that got away. Others aren't so keen, so let us know what you think.
But to our top story today. Following yesterday's evening's shock news that King Charles has been diagnosed with a form of cancer, messages of support have been pouring in from across the globe and across the political spectrum.
Yes, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said he was sad and shocked by the monarch's cancer diagnosis, but was thankful the illness had been caught early, whilst Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer wished the King all the best for his recovery.
Meanwhile, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, and the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, were among the countless world leaders to send their best wishes to Britain's head of state.
Yes, well, we can now go live to Buckingham Palace and speak to GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, we understand that Prince Harry may be mid-air at the moment. He's coming back from LA.
Yeah, that's correct, Emily. He was spotted this morning arriving at LAX, that's Los Angeles International Airport, and has presumably boarded a flight to London today. He's expected to land this afternoon, according to some of the newspapers this morning. But the King has already started to receive family visitors by the looks of things. Princess Beatrice, his niece, alongside her husband, Edoardo Napoli Mozzi, was spotted leaving Clarence House about an hour ago. That is where King Charles is staying, just slightly down the road here from Buckingham Palace. Of course, we've talked at length now on GB News about the shock announcement yesterday that the King has been diagnosed with a form of cancer, but he's being treated as an outpatient, which means he's not going to be spending nights in hospital, but he's very much receiving treatment at hospital and then coming home at the end of the day. His first round of treatment was yesterday. It's also thought that the King personally telephoned both Prince Harry and Prince William to tell them of his diagnosis before the public announcements at 6 o'clock yesterday. The same thing happened with the King's siblings as well, Prince Andrew, Prince Edward and Princess Anne. Now, although the King's not going to be seen in public for some time, he is still, as we understand it, carrying on with constitutional duties. So going through those important government red boxes, meeting the Prime Minister every week and attending Privy Council meetings. And the Prime Minister was speaking this morning on the radio and said that thankfully King Charles's diagnosis was caught early. And we have been told by lots of medical experts that if cancer's caught early, it's far more treatable. So perhaps a little bit of positive news this morning from the Prime Minister on the King's diagnosis. The King is, Buckingham Palace has said, remaining very positive about his treatment and his diagnosis, and looks forward to returning to work, public work, as soon as possible. But nonetheless, a very worrying time for him and the royal family.
Cameron, there's a huge amount of speculation as to whether or not the Prime Minister slipped up this morning when he said that the King's cancer had been caught early. That's something that Buckingham Palace did not say in their statement yesterday evening. It's something that we've only heard from the Prime Minister. I wonder, have Buckingham Palace confirmed that or denied it, or is this something that we're going to have to take on trust from a politician who might well have spoken beyond what he was supposed to say?
Yeah, Tom, I must admit I was surprised that Rishi Sunak came out with that statement on radio this morning. I was told that the Prime Minister was given advance notice of the King's diagnosis ahead of that public announcement, but Buckingham Palace has been keeping very tight-lipped and very controlling of what information they are giving to the public. Presumably, the Prime Minister, as the King's First Minister, would have been told perhaps a bit more detail than the public, so we can speculate as to whether or not it was a slip-up from the Prime Minister. Of course, all medical details are coming from Royal Communications and the King's communications team. What they have said is it's not prostate cancer. And the cancer was discovered when they were treating his benign enlarged prostate a few weeks ago. But of course, they don't want to speculate. They don't want the public to speculate, or indeed the media to speculate. But it is a really tricky balance, Tom, because on the one hand, the King is a private individual and has a right to private medical information, but he's also head of state of 15 realms and territories across the world, and the public have a right to know about the health of the monarch.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much indeed, Cameron Walker, GB News royal correspondent there, bringing us up to date.
Well, for more analysis, we're now joined by the editor-at-large for the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths. And Charlotte, this is a fascinating situation because previously, with previous monarchs, we have heard virtually nothing about their health, about whether they're healthy or suffering ill health. First, we hear that the King is getting a checkup on his enlarged prostate, a huge amount of detail, more detail than the Princess of Wales. And now we hear treatment for cancer. Is this a new monarchy, a more open monarchy?
Definitely it is, and I think that's why everyone's at 6s and 7s, because we're so used to the Queen. You know, we'll never know exactly what was wrong with the Queen or how many times in her life she was ill, because she was very careful to be guarded about that, a bit like the current Princess of Wales is. But I think when Charles decided to be open to raise awareness for his enlarged prostate, he thought, well, this is good, I'll talk about it, I'll be open, I'll be a new open monarchy, and that'll be a good tone. But little did he know that this cancer diagnosis was coming down the line, and so now he needs to sort of row back a little bit because he doesn't want us to know too much at this stage. He may be adjusting to the news himself. So now we've got this sort of strange situation where we're all clamouring for more information because we were expecting more, and there's this gap between what we know and what more we could know. And of course, in that void fills frantic speculation, which is what they don't want, but in a way they've sort of invited, I think.
Well, yes, in a way they have. Now, Prince Harry is on his way to London. He may well be arriving imminently, actually, back home. Do you see this? Well, he's doing the right thing, in my view, isn't he?
He's doing the right thing for his own relationship with his father, and also, I don't want to be cynical, but how bad would it look if he hadn't flown on the next available flight? In fact, he initially said, I'll be there within a few days, and what he's done is got you know, the first private jet he can get his hands on, which is slightly alarming, to be honest. But he might be trying to get this trip over and done with because he's due to be on a press tour this time next week with Meghan in Whistler, Canada. And that was a Valentine's Day event they were supposed to be doing together, and I think it was probably going to be quite schmaltzy and sort of holding hands on Valentine's Day to promote the Invictus Games. And I don't see how he's going to get from the UK back to Montecito and to Canada, and the whole tone of his next trip will have to change. It can't be the Meghan and Harry show anymore, because that wouldn't be the right PR strategy at this time. It needs to be about his father. So it might be that he got over here as soon as possible, because he's got quite a big agenda on next week.
Of course, there's been a huge amount of stress, division, acrimony in this family, particularly due to Harry's family. Is this beginning to heal that rift? Could this be a turning point, a real turning point where we see perhaps Harry, who hadn't spoken to his father or his brother for a long, long time, start to heal those wounds?
I think definitely for him and his father, this is a turning point. I mean, he's flown over, he's going to see his father. His father actually managed to communicate the news to him before it broke. In the past, they've had wranglings where news hasn't quite got to Harry and Montecito before the rest of the world have found out about things. So he's got that right, Charles has got that right, and presumably Harry will be quite pleased that he was the first to know, along with his brother. And, you know, he's here, and I think he'll probably end up staying in a royal residence this time. Last time he was here, he didn't end up staying at Buckingham Palace and had to stay in a hotel, because there's always wrangling about where he's going to stay the whole time. So if that happens, I think we can see this as a real turning point. He's going to be put up in a royal residence, he's going to see his father and have presumably quite decent long chats with them, with him and with Camilla. And as for William, not quite sure how that's going to go. I don't predict this being a huge turning point for him and William. But it could be that they communicate a little bit for the first time in an extremely long time.
How long's it been?
That's something. I think, honestly, I don't think they've shared a word for months and months. I think even over this, I mean, some people say they've been in touch over this. I doubt it. I think they will now that he's in the UK. They'll have to perform some logistical conversations. But I honestly think William will be incredibly guarded against Harry at this point.
Very sad. And presumably the king would absolutely love to spend more time with his grandchildren.
I know. What can he do? So even if relations were brilliant, you know, he lives. His children are American now. His grandchildren, sorry. So there's always going to be that distance between them. We found out that for his birthday quite recently, there was a video sent over from Montecito of the kids, and Charles does love kids. He does love his little grandchildren. I don't think he was that hands-on as a father at times for his boys, but he is very hands-on with Louis and George and Charlotte. So, you know, I'm sure he'd love to, but, you know, here's Harry, he's flown over without the kids. Fair enough, you know, they're probably at school in America, they don't want to have their lives disrupted. It's obviously very difficult for their mother. I don't think he's going to see a lot of them during this illness.
Frankly, we've got so much cloud over what is going to go on now. We don't know what treatment the king is taking. We can guess, although it might not be proper to speculate. We don't know how long this is going to go on for either. There's going to be a huge gap at the heart of the royal family now. What happens in this vacuum?
I think William's going to have to step up to the plate. We're going to see a lot of him tomorrow, and I think there's going to be a real ramping up in the next few months of how much we see William, which is slightly a shame for Kate, because Kate needs to see her husband at the moment. She's recovering. But there are reports today that William and Charles have been ramping up the number of times they see each other, and it seems like there's been a bit of a former Prince of Wales to new Prince of Wales training programme that's been going on. In recent weeks, it's been ramped up a little bit. So perhaps Charles knows he's going to have to lean on William. William's going to have to be front and centre of the royal family pretty much alone for the next few weeks or months.
Yes, because, Charlotte, I was reading this morning that King Charles made 516 royal engagements last year, 94 of which were abroad, which sounds absolutely extraordinary.
It's a lot. He should, even if he wasn't ill, he should just halve that number, because he's 75.
Yeah.
I can't work that hard now, and I'm not.
That must be exceptional.
Yeah, no, he is. He's extremely hardworking. Camilla's, you know, always having a go at him about it, telling him he needs to slow down. And William hasn't been doing that many engagements, comparatively, because he's put his family first, and that's fair enough, because he's always said that when he was little, he found it quite difficult that his father fit him around his engagements. So William's come at this parenthood from a very different strategy. So he puts family first and then engagements. So his numbers have never quite reached that level, but I bet you they will start reaching that level now. And it must be really difficult for William, because his kids are still very young. The youngest ones are very little. And his plan was to spend loads of time with his family until they kind of went to boarding school, basically. But if his father's ill, he's going to have to slow down on the parenthood stuff and ramp up the engagement stuff.
Very tricky for all of them. Charlotte Griffiths, thank you so much for joining us, Editor-at-Large of the Mail on Sunday, of course. Well, coming up, Liz Truss tells the Tories how to be popular again. But is she the right person to lecture the party on popularity? This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yep.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12:20, and a man has been arrested following a report by Conservative MP Mike Freer's office of an abusive and threatening phone call received last week.
Yes, the Metropolitan Police said a 46-year-old was arrested on suspicion of malicious communication on Tuesday following the call made on Wednesday, January the 31st. Now, of course, this relates to Mike Freer MP, the MP for Golders Green
Finchley and Golders Green.
Finchley and Golders Green, and he took the decision to step down at the next election because of the abuse, the death threats he's been receiving, particularly due to his pro-Israel views.
Yes, Finchley and Golders Green, of course, a very Jewish area of London. Mike Freer has been the MP there for more than a decade, but saw his office firebombed recently, now the cause of which was not determined, but he'd also seen huge subjugation and political attack from various Islamist groups as well. Well, let's get some more reaction on this story. We're joined in the studio by the Conservative MP for Shipley, Philip Davies. And Philip, I know you know how much abuse Mike Freer had been receiving. It must be, to some extent, a relief that some of the perpetrators of this abuse are seeing the full force of the law.
Yeah, it's good news. I mean, what Mike's had to go through has been abysmal. You wouldn't wish it on anybody. To be perfectly honest, in my experience, at any rate, the police have been extremely good in dealing with issues of threats that MPs have faced. They've been very proactive, and this is obviously good news. Obviously, we don't want to preempt any inquiries that they're making, but I'm sure it's certainly a step in the right direction.
It's worth saying he's only been arrested at this stage, so we'll wait to see what happens with the police investigation there. But it does seem, Philip, these days that it is absolutely fair game when it comes to our politicians, and when there are extremist groups involved, it gets even more dire.
Yeah, well, I mean, we are fair game for criticism, and you know, none of us would want to shy away from that. And you know, people can. I don't mind abuse as long as it's only verbal. To be perfectly honest, you know, it's.
Really, you don't mind?
Yeah, I don't
mind.
I don't mind people. You know, because you have to have a thick skin to be a politician, and so you become immune to it.
Does everyone realise that though?
Well, no. I mean, whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But that's how it is, and I've been doing it long enough. And there's nothing that anybody could say that could possibly offend me. I've heard it all. To be perfectly honest. So it doesn't really...
I suppose the difference here is between, you know, shouting swear words at someone versus a threat.
Yes, exactly.
And a threat of intimidation.
Exactly.
That is the big difference. And
Exactly.
I suppose what Mike Freer had seen was he ended up wearing a stab vest for his constituency surgeries, especially after Ali Harbi Ali, the man who murdered your colleague Sir David Amos, initially wanted to murder Mike Freer.
Yeah, no, exactly. There's a line to be drawn. You know, sort of a general abuse is fine. I don't mind that. I don't think many of us do, as long as people don't mind getting it back with a bit of interest. Sometimes they don't, but that, you know, that's a different issue. But clearly there's a line, and the line is where people have been sent out death threats and things like arson attacks on an MP's office. I mean, it's completely unacceptable, and the intimidation that people get, all of that is completely unacceptable. You can express your opinion. You can express it as forcibly as you like, but when you get to threats, intimidation, and actually carrying out attacks on MPs' offices, you know, it's completely and utterly unacceptable. And the bad thing is for the country, it will, and I have no doubt is, put off very good people, accomplished people, from ever wanting to get involved in politics, and that's the greatest tragedy of all.
Yes, so there are now 2 police investigations that we know about relating to Mike Freer. This about an abusive and malicious phone call, and also, of course, the arson attack. So shall we move on to what's been going on today? We were just showing a speech from Liz Truss, your colleague, former Prime Minister. She's leading this group called Popular Conservatives. Popular?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the agenda that they've got, there's 2 things that strike me about the agenda they've got. They've got 4 things in their agenda. I agree with all of them, as it happens. I've been arguing and voting repeatedly for these 4 agenda items. I was one of the 5 MPs who voted against the Climate Change Act. So I've been banging on about
Remind
this.
us what the 4 points are.
Well, the one is about immigration and about controlling our borders. One is about scrapping all this net zero zealotry. The third bit is about ending the nanny state and all the rest of it. And the 4th one is about cutting taxes. I agree with all 4 of those things. In fact, I don't see it as popular conservatism. I see these 4 things as conservatism.
So you're a PopCon then?
Well, this is conservatism. I don't think it needs...
So why do you think that some of your colleagues, and a good number of them, not just sort of the leaders of the group, Liz Truss, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Lee Anderson and the like, but also quite a few people who perhaps people sitting at home might not have heard of sitting in the audience there, many people that perhaps are less well-known backbench Conservative MPs?
Yeah, well, look, I wasn't there. I'm here, but I can't believe many Conservatives disagree with that agenda. That is conservatism. The thing that strikes me about it, first of all, is, you know, look, Liz Truss did have a go as being Prime Minister, and it didn't go well. I think we can all agree on that. Whatever you think of her agenda, it didn't go well, and she wasn't brought down, by the way, by backbench Conservative MPs. She was brought down by the markets. She was brought down. Well, we believe.
Well, you could argue that the markets panicked because they thought that backbench Conservative MPs wouldn't have allowed the sort of cuts in public spending to balance the book.
Well, Liz Truss said she wasn't going to cut public expenditure at the time. That was the problem. So look, she did have a go. It didn't go well, and she was brought down by the free market that presumably she's arguing for today.
I just wonder that for a lot of people, maybe she's as unwelcome as rain on your wedding day, Tom. But there you go. Let's go. Thank you very much, Philip Davies, Conservative MP for Shipley.
I have to say, Emily Carver and I were talking about what metaphor she'd use. We cycled through so many. Rain on your wedding day was perhaps the nicest of all of the metaphors.
Right, let's get more on this from GBNews political editor Christopher Hope. Christopher, tell us what's being said at PopCon.
Emily, Tom, hi. Yeah, I'm at PopCon here, where we heard Liz Truss speak to us, Jacob Rees-Mogg, and others from this launch of PopCon. It's a fascinating attempt, I think, to reorientate the Tory party, the government, away from dealing with what they see as vested, they would say, left-wing interests, to dealing with the overlooked majority in the country, as they would see it. Earlier, I spoke to Liz Truss before she spoke. Here's what she had to say.
Liz Truss, why do we need, in this country, the Popular Conservatives?
Well, we've had a Conservative government for 14 years, and we've achieved many things, including Brexit, trade deals, keeping Jeremy Corbyn out of office. But one of the problems we have is, though we've got a Conservative government, what we're seeing in our schools, in our universities, in our corporate sector is the spreading of wokery, of left-wing ideas. And what PopCon is about combating that. because the people of Britain want us to deal with the real issues. Immigration's too high, the government's too big, taxes are too high. But what we constantly hear is the left. So PopCon is about challenging that. It's about challenging the left-wing orthodoxy and making it positive to be a conservative.
So has your government lost its way then? That's why you need it?
We need a grassroots movement. That's what this is about. It's about making sure that the environment is positive for conservatism so that people feel empowered to talk about being a conservative and it becomes a positive thing in society, because I believe that conservative solutions are the right solutions. I know from talking on the doorstep to residents in Norfolk, that's what they want. They want us to deliver conservative policies. They know that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. But what we need is a grassroots movement to challenge that left-wing ideology.
But the Tory government can't say that. Now, why is that? That's a kind of an issue for a party being in charge for 14 years.
Well, as I've said, we've done great things as a government, but what this is about the long term. It's about influencing society, because it's not just about what the government does, it's also about what happens in our corporations, what happens in our schools. Yeah. And for that, you can't just tell people what to do from government. You actually need to influence the debate. And you need to make it a positive thing to be a Conservative.
Have you briefed the government or Party HQ about the movement?
Well, everything we're doing is very, very public. Mark Littlewood, who's leading the movement, wrote an article saying what it's about. I've been very open about my Conservative values for years and years and years. And what we want is we want other people to join us.
So it's helpful, is it, for Rishi Sunak? I mean, how would you feel if you were in number 10 and your predecessor established a new group called Popular Conservatism?
Well, what I found when I was in number 10 and when I was a minister is that although we wanted to achieve policy goals, like reducing immigration, like cutting taxes, too often the bureaucracy was against us. Too often there were external forces that were against us. So what we need to do is actually change the bureaucracy.
Change the mood music.
And we need to, the mood music, the weather, but also we need to restore the importance of Parliament. We need to restore the importance of democratic decision-making, because there is too much decision-making being made by people who aren't accountable. You know, we saw that on the post office scandal. We've seen it with the Environment Agency, the OBR. So this is about returning the decision-making to politicians, because ultimately politicians can be voted out. If people don't like what politicians do, they've got a choice at the ballot box, whereas if it's one of these unaccountable bodies, how on earth do we change things? And that's what we're saying today.
Do you worry how it looks? Is it necessary because there's not many authentic right-wingers at the top of government now? Is that why you need this new group?
We're a grassroots movement, so this is all about making the Conservative argument across the country. And I think, to be frank, Conservatives have been on the back foot for some time in making those arguments. It's not about the government, it's about society, it's about the Conservative Party, it's about where we go from here. But to my mind, the values that people in Britain believe in need to be reflected more in our public discourse.
And just finally, will you be feeding into the Tory manifesto in the upcoming election?
Absolutely. I mean, part of what we want to do today is to get these ideas adopted in the Conservative manifesto, because it's not enough just to change our policies. It's not enough just to say we want to cut immigration, we want to cut taxes. We need to show people how we're going to do it. And in order to do that, we do need to change the bureaucracy. We do need to empower government and politicians to be able to deliver.
That was Liz Truss there talking to me earlier before she spoke at this PopCon event just launched. And with me now is Lord Frost, David Frost, who was in the audience. David Frost, how did you find that? It seemed actually strangely upbeat for a party so far behind in the polls.
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting or even inspiring event, actually, with a lot of good speakers saying a lot of things I agreed with. I think the best chance we've got of winning this election whenever it comes is for some really popular policies. Reform, change, democracy, getting a grip on the institutions, delivering what Brexit was about. That's what I heard today. That was great.
And we heard Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, who also broadcasts on GB News, but of course is a senior Tory MP. He was saying that the age of Davos man is over. He was looking to the continent at the farmers' protest, saying there is a widespread concern about unapproachable or faraway institutions running people's lives. And he used that in the UK, didn't he, talk about ECHR withdrawal and other issues?
Yeah, and I wrote about that last week, actually, in the Telegraph, that the problem we've got at the moment is a set of institutions that don't properly respond to what the British people want, which is why we keep voting at elections and not getting entirely what people voted for. And while the institutions respond to kind of international law, international institutions, international ways of doing things, they aren't going to deliver for the British people. And that's what we need to make happen if we're going to win.
Liz Truss spoke, and she talked, didn't she, about why was a government minister meeting with Greta Thunberg, and that, of course, was Michael Gove back in 2019. Do you worry that the Tory party has lost touch with its grassroots? It's happy amongst it, it's happy in London dinner parties, it's happy in the M25, and is this an attempt to reach out beyond that comfort blanket?
I think it's possible some Tory parliamentarians have lost touch a bit with what the party in the country thinks, but not all. And I think the party in the country, voters, members, are really on board for a set of genuinely popular Conservative policies that take back control, bring change, get the country going again, make it feel different. That's what they want. That's what I hear every time I'm out campaigning and speaking, and I'm sure that's what we can deliver.
But your party, of course, is in power, in government. Why is this conversation happening in public with journalists like me listening? Why not behind the scenes? Why not, shouldn't be feeding into the manifesto system and then surprise Labour with some new policies?
I mean, that's what I would like to see. I still hope that it might yet happen in the months before the election. But I think what we've got to get beyond is this sense that lots of Conservatives now have, that we are doomed to defeat, that all we can do is wait, that we've set a path which isn't working well and all we can do is wait for the election. We still can win it. We still can change things. We still can put out popular policies. And I think our voters and our members have got to see people making that case and arguing for it in public, not just behind closed doors.
You can almost hear GB News viewers and radio listeners yelling at their TV or radio saying, you've been in power for 14 years, David Frost. Why do you need 5 more?
The last 5 years haven't gone as well as we thought for reasons we all know about, COVID, a few other things. We've not really been in power for 14 years. Some of it was in coalition. But there's no doubt we should have delivered more. There's no doubt we should have delivered more, and we all bear our responsibility for that. That doesn't mean that the right reaction is to hand over to Keir Starmer and a bunch of socialists. It's to get things right. But we can't expect people to trust us unless we can put out the programme, show that it's going to be different, show that we can yet deliver the change that people want.
I must ask you about yourself as well. You're a parliamentarian, but also you want to be an MP. You're on the approved list of candidates. Are you going to be an MP, and have you got a seat yet?
I'm still looking. I'm looking for seats. I'm pursuing a number of possibilities. We'll have to see how they play out. Of course, the prospect for MPs actually winning seats for the Conservative Party is not getting any easier over the last year, but nevertheless, I'm positive. And with a bit of luck, it could still happen.
Are you concerned about Big Beast leaving the stage? Kwasi Kwarteng, of course, announcing today he's not standing at the next election.
Well, I think every party needs to renew itself. Every party needs new people coming forward. We've heard one great new candidate today speaking here. There'll be many others.
Murray Fraser.
That's right, Murray Fraser, fantastic speech, really good ideas. There's more of that coming through. So every party renews itself, and that's what's happening.
Lord Frost, thank you. Well, Lord Frost there, enthused by an event which could have felt funereal but didn't. And that may offer some hope for this party in the future.
Chris, absolutely fascinating stuff. I've been munching on the popcorn all the way through. Thank you so much for bringing us the very latest from the launch of popular conservatism there in central London.
Yeah, it's great to hear from David Frost and Liz Truss herself. Good stuff. Well, back in the studio, we still have Philip Davies, MP. Your reaction?
Yeah, look, I mean, this
Do you
is
think they've got something to sell that actually people will listen to?
They're selling conservatism. The irony is, of course, is that actually the Prime Minister that's actually the closest to delivering on this agenda is actually Rishi Sunak. Far more than Boris Johnson. Well, if
he stuck the boot into Rishi Sunak, saying that he's failed to counter left-wing extremism.
Well, take all four issues, OK, that they're campaigning on. First of all, immigration. Rishi's just introduced new rules which will reduce the level of immigration. Boris left us with a very liberal immigration system because he was a liberal on immigration. He was when he was mayor of London.
Truss has been too.
Exactly. She wanted growth visas. She wanted to increase immigration from a very high level. Rishi has actually introduced new rules to make it harder. You can't bring dependents in now. You can't. You have to earn more before you're allowed into the country. So he's actually delivering on that part of the agenda. Net zero. Boris was a net zero fanatic. Absolute fanatic on net zero. Rishi has actually delayed the ban on new petrol and diesel cars, new banning oil and gas boilers. So he's much closer to this agenda.
He reversed Liz Truss's liberalisation of the rules for shale gas exploration onshore in the UK.
Look, I'm in favour of shale gas. That wasn't going to happen, right? But in terms of the net zero agenda, Rishi's delivering more on this than Boris ever did, OK? On nanny state, Boris was the man, remember, who wanted to ban buy one, get one free offers.
Rishi Sunak's banning smoking.
Hold on, Tom. And Rishi Sunak scrapped that ban on buy one, get one too. Now, I agree with you on the smoking ban, which is completely ludicrous. OK, I totally agree with that. But, of course, Boris delivered the biggest nanny state of all time, which was restrictions during COVID.
Time-limited restrictions.
They weren't. They went on for 2 years.
That was a limited time.
They destroyed the economy. They destroyed the economy. Lower taxes.
But you can't seriously compare a COVID lockdown with an infinite ban on smoking.
Well, I don't agree with the ban on. I don't agree with the ban on smoking. I've just said I don't agree with the ban on smoking. But Boris was the one who wanted all those lockdowns. Rishi didn't. The COVID inquiry has shown those messages. And on the final thing on lowering taxes, actually, Rishi always made clear in the leadership election, get inflation down, then I'll cut taxes, which is what Nigel Lawson advised him to do, by the way. And what has he done? Inflation's come down, and he's now starting on a tax.
Perhaps one of the reasons
Boris had the highest rate of taxes in history.
Who was his Chancellor?
But Boris was the First Lord of the Treasury.
One of the reasons why Rishi Sunak didn't win against Liz Truss was he raised national insurance. Now he's boasting about cutting national insurance. It's inconsistent.
No, it's not at all, because Rishi was basically trying to make sure that we had sound money to cope with Boris's spending sprees, right? Now we don't have that sort of desire to spend money as if it's going out of fashion. Rishi has kept his promise to cut taxes. So whether it's cutting immigration, cutting taxes, or the other two items, Rishi is actually the closest Prime Minister to actually delivering on this popular conservatism agenda, which is why it's not popular conservatism, it's conservatism. We all agree on these matters.
Philip, now, you will know better than I do that there are many different versions of conservatism, and we see them represented in the Conservative Party, Liz Truss, the free market variety. But you do also have paternalistic conservatives, what some may call one nation conservatives. Are you at risk of having the blinkers on by saying, this is the only conservatism, this is conservatism?
Well, it's the conservatism I believe in, and if
it's not the only one, though, is it?
Well, we are a broad church, obviously, just like the Labour Party is a broad church. In our system, we put our coalitions together before the election rather than after. It's a similar system. It's just done the other way around. So, yes, we're a broad church. But, look, the key theme of conservatism has always been a belief in the free market rather than the state. That's a key tenet of conservative belief, that the free market is preferable to state interference, that we believe in low taxes, that people should keep more of their own money, and that people spend their own money better than the state spends it for them, that people make decisions for themselves better than the state make for them. They're key conservative principles which should really apply to anybody who's a conservative, to be perfectly honest.
I don't think they do.
Are you worried that amidst all of this, whether we're talking about different strands of conservative philosophy, the Labour Party is putting out adverts on the cost of living and saying the Conservatives are just fighting amongst themselves, not caring about the real issues that people out there living life really face in this country? It's, from the Labour Party's perspective, quite a useful dichotomy.
Yes, I mean, I agree. I mean, all of these initiatives, they're not particularly helpful. I'm not even sure they're designed to be helpful, in the sense that, we've tried out for the last few months the idea of a circular firing squad, and I think we've proved beyond doubt it doesn't work, right? In politics, a circular firing squad doesn't work. Actually, if we just concentrate on what united us all, the things that we actually agree with, rather than trying to find something we disagree with each other about, and turned our attention on the Labour Party, who have got absolutely no idea. They're trying to win an election by saying nothing, doing nothing, and hoping nobody notices, and they're being allowed to because we're too busy trying to find something we disagree with each other about, rather than actually sitting back and actually saying, do you know what, on the broad thrust of what the government's delivering, we all actually genuinely agree with the thrust of the direction of travel. Is it going fast enough? Well, it never goes fast enough for some of us. But is the government moving in the right direction on all of these agenda items? And everybody can agree, yes, the government is moving in the right direction on all 4 of these agenda items.
Well, there you go. Those are the words of Philip Davies, MP, Conservative MP for Shipley. Good stuff.
Absolutely, really fascinating. But coming up before 1 p.m, we're going to be talking to a University of Bristol professor sacked for anti-Zionist views. But before all of that, another huge story on our agenda today, the manhunt for the man accused of a chemical attack on the streets of London.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has made her much-anticipated appearance before the Scottish COVID inquiry today. It comes after allegations emerged that she deleted key pandemic WhatsApp messages, used the pandemic to push her own political agenda. But let's just cast our mind back, shall we, to August 2021, when Sturgeon was asked if she'd hand over all her WhatsApps to the inquiry. Here we go.
I think if you understand statutory public inquiries, you would know that even if I wasn't prepared to give that assurance, which for the avoidance of doubt I am, then I wouldn't have the ability. This will be a judge-led statutory public inquiry.
Which, for the avoidance of doubt, I am. OK. Well, you weren't, were you? But fast forward to today, and she was much less forthcoming.
WhatsApp messages between yourself and Mr Yusuf and Ms Lloyd were produced by you. Where did you get them?
They were provided to me through the Scottish Government.
But did you delete them?
Yes.
Did you consider yourself, against that background and your considerable ministerial experience, to be precisely the right First Minister for the job?
No, that's not how I would have thought of it at all. There's a large part of me wishes that I hadn't been.
All right, then. I'm joined now by Tory MP Lee Anderson. Lee, are those just crocodile tears?
Well, it looks like crocodile tears to me, Patrick. I mean, first we had the missing camper van. Nobody knows where that is. Now we've got this nonsense. We've got these burner phones, dodgy £5 phones from wherever they bought them from, WhatsApp messages going missing. It all looks a little bit dodgy to me. I mean, she's bleating on there, she's crying on screen. This is not cutting no ice. You know, it's crocodile tears. It makes you wonder what the SNPs are all about, Patrick. It looks... I mean, the people that have burner phones, let's be clear, people that have these dodgy phones where you can't trace them and disappearing WhatsApp messages, these are normally criminals, these are drug dealers. And you know what? These SNPs are no better than criminals.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just gone 1:45, and the manhunt for the chemical attack suspect Abdul Azidi has now entered its 6th day. This is Metropolitan Police appeal for anyone with information to come forward.
Yes, yesterday a 22-year-old man was arrested and later released on bail. That was for suspicion of assisting the alleged chemical attacker. Now, the suspect, Abdul Azidi, has been on the run since the attack on a woman and her 2 young girls in Clapham. That was on Wednesday.
Well, we're now joined by GB News reporter Ray Addison outside New Scotland Yard. And Ray, you've been covering this story for the best part of a week now. What more do we know?
Well, the latest update from the Met Police was delivered yesterday around about 6 o'clock when we got that image of the suspect, Zaidi, walking in along All Hallows Lane. He just left the Tower Hill tube station and was approaching Suffolk Bridge. That image shows him wearing that distinctive black jacket, all zipped up, his hands deep in his pockets, the hood pulled down over his face, perhaps in an attempt to try and cover up that distinctive injury to the right-hand side of his face. And that really is the last known sighting of him. That was around 9:50 in the evening on Wednesday of that incident. Since then, we've heard that there has been the arrest in the early hours of yesterday morning of a 22-year-old man. He was taken to a South London police station and then bailed later on that afternoon. This is the commander of the Met, John Saville, telling us a bit more about that arrest.
We arrested a man in London on suspicion of assisting an offender. We took him to a police station in South London where we've interviewed him. We're following up further lines of inquiry from there, and I further urge anybody that's got any information, do please come forward. We are saying that members of the public, if they do see him now, don't approach him, ring 999 and we'll get there quickly and we'll arrest him. We are keeping a very open mind as to where he may be and what might have happened to him, but the CCTV at the moment, there's no suggestion that he's gone near the water.
Well, police are tracking Azadi's bank card, which he's been using to navigate the city's underground stations. They say that hasn't been used since Wednesday evening. Two possibilities: either he's come to some form of harm or now he's being sheltered.
Very interesting indeed, Ray. Thank you very much for bringing us that latest update from outside New Scotland Yard. Where could he be, Tom?
I know. And no sighting of him and no credit card use since Wednesday evening. Well, does leave one possibility. Perhaps he is no longer walking on this earth.
Well, who knows? So, shall we move on? Because this is an interesting one. A university academic who was sacked after criticising Israel has successfully claimed that he was discriminated against for his anti-Zionist views.
Professor David Miller drew controversy during a lecture at Bristol University in 2019 when he said the quote-unquote Zionist movement was one of 5 pillars driving Islamophobia in the United Kingdom. Professor Miller has successfully claimed he'd been unfairly dismissed on the grounds of religion or belief.
Yes, his lawyers said this judgment establishes for the first time ever that anti-Zionist beliefs are now protected in the workplace, but the university's Union of Jewish Students say the ruling has left them feeling less safe. Well, joining us now to discuss this is the Chief Executive at the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, Gideon Falter. Gideon, what do you make of what's happened with respect to David Miller's dismissal from the University of Bristol? I've been looking at some of the things that David Miller has either written or said, and to me, they sound rather extreme.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. He is an extremist. And a lot of what he said, one would look at it, and I think it'd be hard to draw a conclusion, certainly my opinion, that he's anti-Semitic and racist as a result of it. If you look, for example, at him saying that Jewish students, by virtue of being members of the Union of Jewish Students, which he has a problem with, are posing a threat to Muslim and Arab students, that he says that Zionists need to be directly targeted on campus, all that sort of a thing. This is quite extreme rhetoric coming from someone who was a university professor. And whilst he has won his employment tribunal case, we're very concerned by it. And we're hoping and expecting that the University of Bristol will appeal it. We're actually looking with our own lawyers whether we're able to take action as well. But it's not quite the win that is being portrayed as. First of all, under UK employment law, there is a very, very wide range and very low threshold of what constitutes a philosophical belief or a protected belief. So, for example, ethical veganism has the status of being a philosophical belief just because it's a view that somebody holds that doesn't change over time, and it's not, it doesn't really mean anything that the tribunal has ruled in this way on that. The tribunal did rule that his statements were irresponsible and extremely ill-considered. It found him culpable and blameworthy. They slashed his compensation by 50% and then by a further 30% on account of his conduct and on account of his conduct after he was dismissed as well. And they found that actually, and I'm quoting here, there was a realistic chance that the claimant, David Miller, would have been dismissed. So there's a chance that he would have been dismissed anyway over his conduct. The problem with this case, and this is the real rub here, is that the University of Bristol doesn't actually seem to have made its case that he was anti-Semitic and making anti-Semitic statements. They seem to have made their case based on various other of his remarks. And because of that, it was never an open question for the tribunal whether David Miller is an anti-Semite, whether what he said is anti-Semitic. Instead, they were reviewing different remarks about Zionism and the State of Israel and things like that, which has sort of opened the door to this verdict that we now have, that he was unfairly dismissed. It's not the case that he's going to be reinstated. Reinstatement was never on the cards. He has been strongly criticised by the tribunal. And this is still, nonetheless, a judgment that we are concerned by and we're hoping to take action over.
Gideon, we have very little time, but just for those watching who might not know what Zionism is or why Jewish people in particular, so many Jewish people feel that people who express what they call anti-Zionism really does mean to some people anti-Jewishness.
I mean, it's fundamental. Article 1 of the UN Charter gives all peoples the right to self-determination. Zionism is simply the movement that says that Jews have the exact same rights to self-determination as everybody else. So you say that you're anti-Zionist, you're basically saying that you are against Jews having the same rights of self-determination given to all people on the earth by the UN Charter.
Well, thank you very much indeed for making that so succinct. Gideon Falter, who is the Chief Executive at the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Now, the University of Bristol has issued a statement saying they're disappointed with the decision, and in the next hour, we will be speaking to David Miller, the professor himself that was dismissed from the university. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A three-way split with the weather today. Very windy in the far north, but bright and breezy for most of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Then we've got this wet zone over the Midlands and parts of Wales. A very wet day in Wales. Much of the south dry and cloudy. Snow coming in across Shetland with a very gusty wind here, making it feel really cold across the far north of Scotland. But some brighter skies through the central belt and Northern Ireland. Hazy sunshine on offer here. But it is colder air moving in from the north. Very mild conditions persist across the far south. The rain across the Midlands and Wales will trickle southwards through this evening over southern parts of England, so turning wet here. The snow may ease for a time in Shetland, but then more wintry weather coming in from the northwest. So snow and ice are concern across a good part of northern Scotland tonight. A good covering of snow in places, as well as some slippery conditions on untreated roads and pavements. In fact, a widespread frost across much of northern Britain. Staying relatively mild in the south with the outbreaks of rain here. They'll slowly peter out tomorrow morning. For many, it'll be a bright and a fine day, but a continued risk of snow showers in northern Scotland, continued ice risk through the morning as well. As I said, for many, dry and bright, but the wet weather in the south is going to push back further north on Thursday, and that could give rise to some further snow. So we have further Met Office yellow warnings in place for the snow on Thursday. Parts of Wales, the Midlands, Northern England and Northern Ireland at risk. Check out the Met Office website for the details of those weather warnings.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
"2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, Weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of 3 abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures, endless red tape. As Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain, they've simply had enough, and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 1 o'clock on Tuesday, the 6th of February.
Prince Harry heads home. The Duke of Sussex is expected to arrive in London imminently to see his father after the King was diagnosed with a form of cancer. Could we now see Harry brought back into the fold?
Manhunt Day 6. Abdullah Zaidi still eludes police capture almost a week after his vicious chemical attack in South London. The last time the Have-A-Go Christian was seen was on January the 31st. Is he even still alive?
PopCon at the ready. Former Prime Minister Liz Truss, along with other senior Conservatives, has launched a new campaign group for lower taxes, less regulation, and an end to what they call net zero zealotry, along with robust control of our borders. But is anyone listening?
Well, a lot of you did like what you heard from the former Prime Minister, Liz Truss. In your minds, perhaps she was the one who got away. Some of you not so sure, though. Martin's written in, he says, just the same pompous drivel. Too little, way too late in the day, Liz Truss, the one that got away, the one who needs to go away, more like. But John says, love Liz Truss's speech. That's what he said.
Succinct and to the point. And I think it was interesting talking to Philip Davies about what this group was all about. Philip Davies, of course, the MP for Shipley, was not at the launch of PopCon, but he was saying, well, he agrees with the aims and principles. He was just asking, why does there need to be another group? He was also fairly critical of Liz Truss's time as Prime Minister, saying she wanted to cut taxes but not cut spending as well. And I think that is a legitimate criticism of Liz Truss. There are many illegitimate criticisms of Liz Truss, in my view, particularly pinning world events that happened while she was in office on her, I think, is unfair. But I think it is fair to suggest that if you're going to cut taxes, you should probably cut spending as well, rather than cut taxes and massively increase spending at the same time.
Which is what she did, because she announced a huge energy package, didn't she? At the same time as massive tax cuts, which isn't the best thing to do, according to the markets anyway. Linda says, Liz Truss reminded us of many valuable lessons that have been eroded over the last few years. Let's hope her observations were heard by other politicians who have let the important issues fall by the wayside. So, strong support from Linda towards Liz Truss. I'm not sure how many of her colleagues will be listening. Rishi Sunak probably not, but hey.
But I suppose this is all more about what happens after the election rather than before it, the battle for the soul of the Conservative Party. But we'll get onto that and much more royal news after your headlines with Sam. Tom, Emily, thank you very much and good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 1 o'clock. More on our top story today. Prince Harry, we expect, will arrive in London soon as the King undergoes treatment for an unspecified form of cancer. It's unclear whether Prince Harry will meet with his brother, the Prince of Wales, who's expected to be carrying out some of his father's royal duties in the coming weeks. His Majesty reportedly did tell his sons about his diagnosis before Buckingham Palace made the announcement last night. Palace officials are hoping the news encourages others who are affected by the illness. Meanwhile, members of the public have shared their best wishes for the King with GB News.
The fact that he was already in hospital and he'd had obviously the enlarged prostate, and I understand from reading the news this morning it's not the prostate that's worried about, it's another form of cancer. But the fact that it's been caught mega early, you know, hopefully he should be fine, fingers crossed.
I just think it's sad. It's the same as any family. If someone gets that sort of news, obviously it's going to be devastating. But I suppose he's handling it pretty well at first.
It's so sad, really, with the loss of the Queen not too long ago. Now he's having cancer. Yeah, it's a sad time.
More developments in another story making the news today. Police say they believe there are people who know the whereabouts of the man suspected in a recent chemical attack who've chosen not to come forward. Abdullah Zaidi is wanted in connection with the attack in South London that left a woman critically injured and now in danger of losing her eyesight in one eye. Police are warning that anyone found to have assisted the suspect will face arrest. That comes after a 22-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. He, though, has since been released on bail. Azidi was last seen leaving Tower Hill Tube Station in East London just after 9:30 last Wednesday evening. Police are urging anyone with information to come forward. Liz Truss has said democracy has become unpopular. That's as she unveiled a new group aimed at boosting Conservative ideas. The Popular Conservatives Movement, or PopCon, aims to take on what the former Prime Minister called left-wing extremists. The Liberal Democrats, though, have accused some of those present at today's launch of economic vandalism. But Ms Truss told GB News earlier she thinks left-wing ideas have gone too far.
One of the problems we have is, though we've got a Conservative government, what we're seeing in our schools, in our universities, in our corporate sector is the spreading of wokery, of left-wing ideas. The people of Britain want us to deal with the real issues. Immigration's too high, the government's too big, taxes are too high. But what we constantly hear is the left. So PopCon is about challenging that. It's about challenging the left-wing orthodoxy and making it positive to be a Conservative.
A 46-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of malicious communication. That's following reports of an abusive and threatening phone call to a Conservative MP's office. Mike Freer announced his decision to quit politics last week. He told GB News that's because he fears for his safety. The Justice Minister has been the target of several death threats in recent weeks and an arson attack on his constituency office. Around 8 million people will receive the last of 3 cost of living payments from today. The money will be paid by the Department for Work and Pensions directly into bank accounts of those eligible, and they don't need to apply. It's the third of up to 3 payments, totalling up to £900 for some households on means-tested benefits to help alleviate the cost of living pressures.
The Safety of Regulation and Artificial Intelligence is to get a £100 million boost. Downing Street hopes the funding will help make Britain a leader in the emerging AI sector. A series of research hubs will be set up across the UK, and regulators will be given training to help tackle evolving challenges in fields such as finance, education and healthcare. And finally, some political news to, sink your teeth into. Who writes these? I don't know. A set of dentures once worn by Winston Churchill are up for auction. The false teeth were worn by former Prime Minister during many of his most famous speeches and were designed to protect his natural lisp. They'll go under the hammer in Cheltenham with an expected price of around £8,000. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, we have some breaking news, so let's go straight to Buckingham Palace now and speak to GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Cameron. Where is Cameron? He's not on the sofa.
Turned into a sofa. Let's hope we can speak to Cameron Walker now, who is outside Buckingham Palace with some breaking news for us. Cameron, what is this news?
Well, I will not announce the news because it's to our royal correspondent.
Let's see if we can establish connection with Cameron Walker. Cameron, take it away.
Hello, Tom. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. We've got there in the end.
Great. Perfect. It appears Prince Harry has landed at Heathrow Airport. A photograph which has been reported shows a Range Rover, two blacked-out Range Rovers in a police the tarmac at Heathrow. He was spotted at LAX very early this morning, which would have been overnight Los Angeles time. Presumably he was on a flight across the Atlantic to where he is now on his way to central London to see His Majesty the King. A source close to the Sussexes, close to Prince Harry last night, confirms that Prince Harry has been told personally by the King about King Charles's cancer diagnosis and that he was going to be travelling to London in the coming days to see his father. Now, of course, Prince Harry has not been on the best of terms with his father in recent years following his bombshell memoir Spare and the Netflix documentary series. But clearly this appears to be serious enough, King Charles's cancer diagnosis, for Prince Harry to want to leave Los Angeles and come to the United Kingdom to spend time with his father. So just to repeat that news, it appears Prince Harry, we haven't had official confirmation, but it looks like from the pictures we're receiving that Prince Harry has landed at Heathrow Airport and is on his way into central London in a police escort towards Clarence House, where King Charles is staying.
We'll be concerned with the apparent rush that Prince Harry is making here. Initially, he said he would be coming in a few days. Now he's got the first flight over, a police escort to Clarence House. Should we be more worried about the King's health than perhaps we initially were?
I don't think there's any cause for particular alarm. The Telegraph in the last hour has been reporting that the King is on his usual good form following his treatment yesterday, and he's actually a little frustrated more than anything about the impact his diagnosis is having on others. So he's certainly thinking of others rather than himself, His Majesty the King, by the looks of it. As we heard from the Prime Minister this morning, Rishi Sunak was alluding to the fact he felt he was quite relieved that the cancer had been caught early, and of course medical experts tell us that if the cancer's caught early, it is far more treatable. And I think if there was more cause for alarm, there would be a lot more activity around London, and it appears to be pretty much business as usual. Queen Camilla carrying on with engagements as normal, Prince William also doing the same thing. So I think it's more of a friendly gesture from a son to his father than any cause for alarm.
Well, hopefully it will come as some comfort to King Charles. Thank you very much, GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker outside Buckingham Palace. Good stuff.
Well, let's discuss this further now. We're joined by the author of King Charles III, New King, New Court, the inside story. Robert Hardman, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. This has come as quite a shock to many, many people. Just as King Charles's reign has got going, it's a rather large bump in the road.
Well, it certainly is. I mean, none of us were expecting anything like this. Less than a year and a half into his reign, both his parents lived to a ripe old age, and the king leads very fit, abstemious lifestyle. He's a keen walker. He doesn't eat or drink very much. Doesn't even eat lunch. Yes, we're all worried. But yesterday afternoon, rumours started swirling around, and some of them were quite bleak rumours. And when we actually got the statement we received, it was, I think, actually quite upbeat. It was a sort of, okay, we're going to try and keep business as usual as much as we possibly can. Certainly the constitutional side of his duties are unaffected. He's going to carry on with his meetings with ministers, particularly the Prime Minister, the red boxes, all that stuff. The big difference is for now he's having to cancel all his public engagements because his medical team don't want him going into crowded situations full of strangers who may have some sort of germs, infections, whatever. So it's a sort of practical, pragmatic response at the moment. There's certainly no sense of panic. There's no sense of any major change to any of the sort of constitutional machinery, if you like. I mean, there are mechanisms in place for when we have either an ill or an incapacitated monarch, but no one is dusting those off.
Robert, yeah, as Cameron Walker mentioned earlier, just now, he said the Telegraph are reporting that a palace source says King Charles, he's on usual good form in every way, just a little frustrated that his condition has affected not just his own plans, but impacted on others. Now, as a man who took 516 engagements last year, 94 of which were abroad, this must be a huge frustration for him. He wants to get on with the job.
He does. I mean, he loves interaction with the public. He likes crowds. He likes walkabouts. One of the problems they normally have with him on the road is trying to keep to time, because just as he's going from one engagement to another, he'll sort of see a crowd of people and pop over the road for a chat. And it's one of Queen Camilla's great skills in these situations is she's about the only person who can give him a prod. She often uses the sharp corner of her handbag in the small of his back to sort of give him a reminder it's time we moved on. Yeah, he enjoys meeting the public. He always has done. And that's going to be the greatest frustration. I'm not sure he'll be the greatest patient. I imagine they are trying to ration the paperwork, the correspondence, the bump, the briefing notes that he likes receiving. As one of his former aides said to me, you could never put too much on his plate. He is very used to working late, pushing himself, if you like. And I think that's obviously going to have to slow down a bit, and somebody's got to tell him that.
It's interesting to see how open, relatively, the royal family has been about this diagnosis. If we compare it to the lack of information we heard about the King's mother or indeed the King's grandfather, we knew virtually nothing about their health. Why do you think it is that the King has been much, much more open about his own health? And potentially has this opened a bit of a tricky situation for the royal family? Some information, but not complete information. We're left guessing.
Well, it's a good question. I think it's entirely in keeping with the kind of tone of this reign very early on. Within hours, certainly days of the King becoming king, we were just seeing sort of slight shifts in the way that the palace and the monarchy communicate. I mean, after Elizabeth II became queen in 1952, it was months, 10 months, in fact, before we heard her voice in public. We had to wait till her Christmas broadcast. He was straight on the airwaves the next day. The day after that, the Accession Council, the Privy Council on screen. I mean, that's unheard of. And just generally in the day-to-day course of things, we're just used to seeing what one of his staff described to me as a more informal formality. He's just more comfortable with this sort of communication. He's, as I say, he's of his generation. His parents did not like discussing these sort of things, and nor did that generation and the generation before. I mean, when George VI was very ill, I mean, everyone tiptoed around and no one ever used words like cancer. It was just, it was kept quiet.
Robert, just a quick word from you on Prince Harry dashing back from Los Angeles to see his father. Could this be the rekindling of their relationship, their father-son relationship?
I mean, clearly, it's sort of, you know, we all hope that it is the building of some sort of bridge. The relationship between Harry and his father has been, it never went away. I mean, it was clearly under a great deal of strain following the publication of Spare, following the 6-part Netflix documentary, following endless interviews where the couple have made clear they were not happy with their royal lot. But the lines of communication have never been completely severed, and I think, you know, this bodes well. I think the fact that Harry's just got on a plane, there clearly hasn't been a lot of haggling over this. It's very straightforward. It's a son coming to his father's bedside at a time of need. I think it'd be a great comfort to the king. The next question will be, how long does he stay? Does he meet his brother? Does he put out any sort of statement? I suspect he won't want to upstage the king. I think it'll be all kept quite quiet, low key, but it cannot be anything but a good thing.
Well, we'll keep checking in on Prince Harry's visit as he makes his way, we hear, from Heathrow to Clarence House as we speak. But for now, Robert Hardman, thank you so much for joining us here on Good Afternoon Britain. Yes, thank you very much. But let's return to the manhunt for the chemical attack suspect Abdul Azadi. It's now in its 6th day. That's as the Metropolitan Police appeal for anyone with information to come forward with a £20,000 reward. Yesterday, a 22-year-old man was arrested and later released on bail for suspicion of assisting the alleged chemical attacker. The suspect, Abdul Azadi, has been on the run since the attack on a woman and her 2 young girls in Clapham last Wednesday. Yes, we are now joined by GB News reporter Ray Addison, who's been keeping a close eye on this case. We're now into the 6th day. Do you have any updates on the police investigation?
Well, it would appear that the last known sighting, the last confirmed sighting of Azadi was Wednesday evening. It's obviously the day that this horrific attack took place. He was spotted at 9:50. He'd left Tower Hill Tube Station and was walking across All Hallows Lane in the direction of Suffolk Bridge. That's why the police say they're focusing their attention on South London. That's where they suspect he may have taken some form of shelter. We know that before he left Newcastle on that Wednesday, he didn't amass a large amount of cash. We know also that he's lost his mobile phone. He left his mobile phone in the car. And then we see this sort of potentially erratic behaviour where he's travelled from South London to North London and then back to the south again. Now, is that a man who knows exactly what he's doing? He's got a plan, or is it somebody who's trying to make it up as he goes along? Now, of course, for the police, they'll be hoping that he certainly doesn't have a plan, didn't have this all prepared in advance, and that will give them a better chance of catching him. They've been sifting through hundreds of phone calls to this 24-hour hotline. They've got specialist officers who are poring over, again, hundreds of hours of CCTV footage as well. But the biggest lead seeming to be that location on the Wednesday night, and then this arrest of this 22-year-old man on suspicion of assisting an offender. This is Met Commander John Saville explaining more on that arrest.
We arrested a man in London on suspicion of assisting an offender. We took him to a police station in South London where we've interviewed him. We're following up further lines of inquiry from there, and I further urge anybody that's got any information, do please come forward. We are saying that members of the public, if they do see him now, don't approach him, ring 999 and we'll get there quickly and we'll arrest him. We are keeping a very open mind as to where he may be and what might have happened to him.
Now, police would not tell us what part of London that 22-year-old man was arrested in, but you can perhaps draw some significance from the fact that he was taken to a South London police station. We know now that the focus is on South London. Police tracking his bank card say it hasn't been used since that Wednesday night. So if he didn't have pockets full of cash, he hasn't used his bank card, he's got no mobile phone, has he hunkered down or has he come to some form of harm?
Really, really deep questions to be asking ourselves, and indeed for the police to be digging into. But Ray Addison, for now, thank you very much for bringing us that story.
Yes, thanks, Ray. But coming up, what's the best way to ditch junk food? The head of the NHS wants a ban. But is that the way forward to a healthier, happier nation? Or is that the nanny state gone mad? You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
When you listen to Nigel Farage's assessment there, do you feel that maybe this is as good as it was going to get, given that we had the pandemic and it was inevitably always going to be a bit of a mixed bag?
Well, I think it's a bit of a poor excuse from Nigel there that they haven't done it properly. The facts are, Nigel, that it's not worked. It's not going to work. Yes, we will rejoin. I mean, are we better off for it? Are they...
Can I jump in there, Charlie? We're going to rejoin under which government? Because Labour aren't going to do that, unless you don't think...
But I mean, it's going to be unavoidable not to join, because I think it's getting worse and worse for us. I mean, let me just say this. Are the NHS better because we're out of Europe? No, they're not, because they're not employing more staff. Is the building trade better off? No. Is travelling abroad or to the EU or staying in the EU, are we better off? No. Are we better off because foods rise because of the EU? No. Are we better off with imports and export? No, because they're taking longer. The overall result is that we're not better off. The killer point here is 57% of the public will now vote to remain. 33% would leave. Surely that's the telling point.
It depends on the pollster, Charlie, because we were talking to a very good pollster earlier who said there's no enthusiasm for any change in a year. Maybe 10 years, they might be thinking about it.
Belinda de Lucia, let's bring you in. I'm sure you want to react to what Charlie said.
I mean, who would have thought that the UK wanting to run its own affairs and making our politicians more accountable would be so revolutionary? EU Parliament voted a majority to get rid of the vetoes, the last remaining scraps of democracy that the EU had. Now, luckily for EU citizens at the moment, you know, it means a treaty change to actually go forward. But that is the mood. The ever closer union. We have dodged a federalised, globalist, international, power-gobbling, anti-democratic organisation, and that's worth more than a few trade and travel perks for a few wealthy people in this country.
Hear, hear. Belinda de Lucia, Charlie Mullins, great to see you both.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, hello. The head of the NHS has said that to tackle the UK's obesity crisis and create a healthier nation, there needs to be action that goes beyond the NHS.
This comes as new YouGov polling data for The Times revealed that the public support tougher action on junk food.
Yes, so things like taxes on sugar, things like banning adverts for junk food on the TV and social media, things like that. More regulation in order to help us eat more healthily. So should we go the whole way? Well, we're asking, should we go the whole way and just ban junk food altogether? It is, after all, making us fat.
Well, joining us now to debate this is the former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, and the writer and columnist Emma Wolfe. Now, Emma, let's start with you. Junk food, some people might say, is fine. If you eat it in moderation, if you have self-control, what's the issue with this kind of food?
Well, the issue is that, of course, treats are absolutely fine, but the issue is we have a looming health crisis for our children. Forget COVID, we have somewhere around 22 to 25% of 10-year-olds now with obesity. We have 10% of reception age children, that's 3 and 4-year-old children who are now obese. We have absolutely 100,000 children admitted to hospital to have rotting teeth, decaying teeth, Tom, removed in hospital. Okay? So this is not an issue of it's just a matter of choice. This is an issue of childhood neglect, parental responsibility, a massive billions of pounds cost to the NHS, and we need to do something about this.
Emma, in an ideal world, though, would you ban junk food? Would you rather just not have any of it available for people?
Absolutely. I would not have this sugary, high sugar, high salt, high fat food available. I would not have supermarket offers, buy one, get one free on junk food. I would not have parents feeding their children sugary drinks in their prams at the age of, 2 or 3. In terms of drink, milk and water is absolutely fine for children. Children do not need to be fed constant junk as snacks. It's fine, it's normal, it's healthy for a child to get hungry between meals. We are obsessed with snacking. We live in an obesogenic society where everything is about food, cafes, taking a snack, going out to eat, cooking, all of this. The main thing is that it's a very, very unhealthy legacy for a young child to start off overweight or obese. And until we actually need to crack down on this. We need to ban these kind of junk food machines from schools, from hospitals, from sports centres. I mean, where I go swimming, there are junk food machines in the lobby of a sports centre.
Well, Emma, let's turn this over to Steve Miller now. Steve, all we need to do is ban it.
Well, I think it's true. We've got to put less junk into our trunk, so to speak, because we are a nation of porky peckers, frankly. But I'm not into banning. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's a theory, what Emma's talking about, to ban all junk food. I also think it's unfair on those that are those are people that take responsibility. Why should they be penalised for enjoying the odd chocolate bar, the odd donut, and putting their head in the odd trifle? I think it would be ridiculous. But I do think Emma raises a very good point when it comes to child obesity. And that comes down to the parents. The parents are power when it comes to what children eat. And frankly, when it comes to things like junk food machines, well, where are they getting the money from? They're getting it from the parents. So actually, we need to be tougher, agree. We need to be stronger. We need to be more direct. And that, I'm afraid, also means banning these ridiculous campaigns where everyone says, oh, it's great to love your curves. In other words, it's great to love yourself being a fatty.
Oh, Steve, that's where I disagree with you, because there are people who just are a bit heavier, and we shouldn't dismiss them from, being attractive. You can be overweight and attractive, can't you, Steve?
No, you're misquoting me. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is it is wrong to encourage people to love themselves fat. And what we love in this country is we like these euphemisms. We call it curves. Or you're looking a bit sassy, when in fact we all know what people are saying is, actually, you're fat. And what we shouldn't be doing is encouraging people to kind of applaud themselves fat and love themselves fat. That is wrong, because what you're doing is you're telling them to love themselves to an early grave. No, I think we don't ban junk food, but we certainly start putting over much firmer messages and letting people know, yes, less junk in your trunk. Especially for the men, if they want to go from a pud to a stud, I tell you now, they've got to eat less junk.
Well, Emma Wolf, how about that? All we need is more personal responsibility. We don't need to take away the temptation. We just need to be more disciplined with ourselves.
Well, I agree with Emily that we shouldn't be, we should not be denigrating or criticising people if they are in a larger body. Of course not. But we need to be really, really clear that we need to stop glorifying this kind of body positivity movement. Is not healthy when we're trying to glorify, plus size or obesity, such as the singer Lizzo. That is not a healthy size to be. That is not a healthy way for a body to live. But in terms of personal responsibility, That's okay, but we also need to recognise that being overweight or underweight, and I've written a lot about anorexia, and I've been very open about my own issues with eating disorders and all of that. And I believe that being overweight has similar emotional, it's a similar emotional crutch to being underweight. I think we need to be really aware that people struggle with this, that they use food as a crutch, as an emotional tool, that comfort eating is something that people turn to when they're in distress in other ways. So yes, it's about personal responsibility, but it's also about children and babies and young people. And when you're talking about that, you do need to start looking at regulation, because if parents won't take responsibility, it's a bit like the toothbrushing thing.
Yeah.
I don't want us to brush people's teeth in schools, but if the parents won't do it, then we do need to intervene to save the health of children.
Shouldn't be having children then, should they?
Just last word to you, Steve. It seems that more regulations on bad food is very popular with the public. Why do you expect that is?
Well, I think it's just until it happens, and I think the public would regret it strongly. You see, in Japan, where the obesity rate is 5%, they still have fast food chains and all of that, but they have a culture where it is the norm. They've embedded it very well into the culture to say that actually, if you're fat, you sort it out. You do own your body, yes, with support as well. When it comes down to child obesity, which we talked about here, it is the responsibility of the parents. And frankly, if you're not prepared to look after the health of your child, which includes their weight, you should not be having children in the first place. Common sense to me.
Yes, and I'm sure parents shouldn't be too restrictive either, because they don't want them to go the other way and get obsessed with eating as little as possible. But there you go. Thank you very much indeed, Emma Wolf, who is a writer and columnist, and Steve Miller, presenter of Fat Families, of course.
Well, what a smashing debate that.
Yes, let us know what you think at home.
I'm just a little bit confused about what junk food actually is. When the Mayor of London tried to ban adverts for junk food, he ended up banning adverts for hummus. Anyway, coming up, we're going to be joined by the University of Bristol academic who won a landmark decision that he was discriminated against because of his anti-Zionist beliefs. That's to come after your headlines with Sam.
Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's gone 1:30. The headlines this hour, as we've been hearing in the last half hour or so, Prince Harry has touched down in London as the King undergoes treatment for an unspecified form of cancer. It's unclear whether Prince Harry will meet with his brother, the Prince of Wales, who's expected to carry out some of his father's royal duties. His Majesty reportedly told his sons about his diagnosis before Buckingham Palace made the announcement. Palace officials hope the news encourages others who are affected by the illness. A £20,000 reward is being offered for anyone with information on the whereabouts of a man who's wanted in connection with a chemical attack in South London. Abdulaziz is suspected of attacking a woman with a corrosive substance, leaving her with potentially life-changing injuries. Police are warning that anyone found to have assisted the suspect will face arrest. Izedi was last seen leaving Tower Hill Tube Station in East London just after 9:30 last Wednesday evening. Liz Truss has said that democracy has become unpopular as she unveiled a new group aimed at boosting Conservative ideas. The Popular Conservatives Movement, or PopCon, aims to take on what the former Prime Minister has called left-wing extremists. The Liberal Democrats have accused some of those present at today's launch of economic vandalism. But Ms Truss told GB News earlier that she thinks left-wing ideas have gone too far. Labour has accused Downing Street of leaving the financial crisis in local councils for the next government to solve. Clive Betts, who's the Labour chairman of the Levelling Up Committee, is warning that many people will see a rise in rates as councils look to plug their funding gaps. That's after more than a decade of warnings over financial pressures in councils which have put up vital services under strain. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick look at the markets this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.2567 and 1.1701 euros. The price of gold is currently £1,614.80 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,658 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
We had Grant Shapps on last week. He was talking about how defence spending is now creeping up to 2.25% of GDP. Ben Wallace's predecessor suggested it should be 3%. We hear that we've got the smallest army, I think, since the Napoleonic Wars. Numbers are down. There's a question as to whether we can staff frigates in the Red Sea. Why haven't we sent aircraft carriers? What's your impression of the situation?
Well, I don't think it matters how much you spend, it's how effectively you spend it. And we spend it very ineffectively. We have lots of scandals about defence spending. And I think partly because of the monopoly position of some of our defence suppliers, we don't get good value and we don't get reliability. This latest story in the Telegraph is that HMS Diamond, which is our ship, which is out there defending the Red Sea, doesn't have the capability of firing a missile from the ship to the land, so it can't participate in the attacks on the Houthis. So in order that we can participate in the attacks, we're flying RAF aircraft from Cyprus, which is a very long way away. When I was Defence Secretary, I ordered cruise missiles for our nuclear-powered, but not nuclear-armed submarines. And I think we have 6 or possibly 7 of those. But last autumn, it was reported that 5 of those were out of commission, were not available. We have about 21 aggressive surface ships. So we've got 2 aircraft carriers, and we've got frigates, and we've got destroyers. But at any one time, you can count on about half of those not being available because they're under refit or whatever. So we have a minimal surface fleet now. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem that we're able to deploy a submarine to the area that can fire cruise missiles. Our 2 aircraft carriers, built at enormous expense, are sitting in Portsmouth.
Which seems to most people ludicrous,
well,
at least with what's going on.
It doesn't seem ludicrous to me.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 39 minutes past 1, and as we learn that Prince Harry is currently in a police escort on the way from Heathrow Airport to Clarence House to visit his father, let's discuss the implications for the royal family and the country. We're joined by the former Labour MP Stephen Pound and broadcaster Mike Parry. Stephen, this is pretty extraordinary. A pretty quick visit from Prince Harry, pretty rapidly getting over the Atlantic.
Well, you can hardly blame him. This is a pretty serious situation. And what's fascinating is that the juxtaposition of 2 stories in the papers today. On the one hand, you've got His Majesty, who's still getting the red boxes. He's still actually looking at all the papers of state. He's still actually signing off on legislation. On the other hand, you've got 2.8 million people who can't even get out of bed to do a flipping job in this country. I mean, it seems to be a bit of a difference there, doesn't it?
Oh, this is the story about the number of people who've just declared themselves unfit to work because they're ill.
Well, not only have they declared themselves unfit for work, but half of them say they don't actually want a job. And they're now saying they're suffering something called tech neck, which is where you sit at home all day on the computer and your neck hurts, or bad back because you're working from home. I mean, what a contrast. I mean, I have to say, His Majesty is really showing the way, and I think the rest of the people just a drag on the economy.
Well, Mike, there's some truth to that, isn't there? King Charles, we were amazed this morning to read that he had 516 engagements last year, 94 of which were abroad. That is a hard worker.
It's incredible. People forget now he's 75. Now, at 75, most people have decided to call it a day. You know,
present company.
Present company accepted, but I mean, I'm a gentleman entering early middle age, you see what I mean? I don't think I want to be working at 75.
You probably will be, Mike. We won't be able to get you off the telly.
There's two issues to raise with His Majesty the King that I haven't heard discussed so far. Firstly, could the stress of having to sort out the Harry situation over the last 2 years have contributed to his illness? Because we know that stress does contribute to illness. Stress can give you heart attacks, stress can give you nervous conditions, and I believe if you ask top doctors, they'll say, yes, it could be responsible for at least enhancing the King's, you know, anxiety, and that anxiety in itself might have worked its way physically into his body. And the other issue, I was very ill a few years ago. I was in hospital for 4 months waiting for a heart transplant, OK?
Wow.
And I can tell you the loneliness of serious illness is something only you can know. Now, I know he's got the Queen alongside him, he's got his son now flying across the Atlantic, he's got the rest of the royal family, but inside your head you are very, very lonely because only you know the intimate conversations you've had with your doctors, only you know how you feel on a day-to-day basis, and only you know the fears in your head about what will become of you.
Well, and Mike, I hope you're wrong that the stress caused by family rifts could have, led along this.
I don't think there's any medical evidence for that whatsoever. And my wife was the chief nursing practitioner at the Royal Marsden Hospital. She did her postgraduate in oncology. And what she said to me, two things. One is, you can always tell there's people who are going to fight through and survive. Even with identical symptoms, some people have it in them to actually fight through and survive. But there's no way in which something like bowel cancer or bladder cancer could possibly be psychosomatic or caused by stress. Yes. I mean, there's no evidence whatsoever to that.
Well, there's not, but doctors talk about it all the time. I mean,
that doesn't necessarily make it right.
It doesn't necessarily make it right, but it doesn't wipe it out altogether.
No.
I mean, the more you worry about things in life, you do inherit medical conditions without a shadow of a doubt. Like, for instance, heart. Who's to say that can't, affect you in other areas of your body with other diseases?
Well, no doubt he has had a lot of stress
That's
in the last
certainly
few
true.
years.
But there is now this great hope. This great hope that perhaps this rift that has gone on for, Emily, as you say, so many years, could be beginning to turn around, that healing might now begin. Stephen Pound, do you think that this is perhaps a path to redemption for Harry?
Well, everybody hopes that it will be. Everybody hopes that His Majesty will survive this. Everybody hopes and prays that His Majesty will come through this with a united family. However, Meghan Markle's not there. She's still in Montecito. I mean, I just weep for the man. If His Majesty comes up out of anaesthetic and there is Meghan Markle there, tape recording him or trying to do another interview, say, can I have a quick word? So I hope it does, because you need a family of this. But there's two issues there. The one that Mike quite rightly identifies. The other thing, of course, Prince Andrew as a Councillor of State. If the worst that would happen would be if you had to have a regency. The second best, if you like, would be if you had to have the councillors of state actually conducting the day-to-day business. Now, I appreciate, obviously, Camilla and, Prince of Wales are the next in line, but then you've got Prince Andrew.
Is Prince Andrew still one of the members?
He's still one of the five.
Because I know there was a big controversy about that at the time of the coronation.
So is Princess Eugenie. There's five.
Because it's literally just about the direct family links rather than any sort of special choosing.
Plus, well, I mean, and they get appointed, and obviously there's an age thing. Otherwise, Prince George.
Stephen, are you a grandfather?
I am just, yes.
You are just.
Yeah.
How important is that relationship between a grandfather and their grandchildren?
Absolutely, totally, utterly, essentially important. It also reshapes your whole relationship with your children. My son's little boy Arlo was born just before Christmas, and my daughter's little girl Lottie was born on July the 5th. And the difference in my relationship between them is extraordinary. It would be heartbreaking if I couldn't be with them, or that there was an animosity there. And, that's why I'm not just the same age as Prince Charles, but I'm also a member of the same human race. Sorry, King Charles.
I don't think that you can never repair the relationship between Harry and William. And I saw Angela Levin on this very station this morning, and she was so specific about the role of Meghan Markle. Meghan Markle doesn't like the United Kingdom, and she doesn't like the royal family. And she made it very clear that, in her opinion, she completely controls Harry's life. So anything Harry wants to do in terms of rapprochement with the King, rapprochement with Prince William, according to Angela, and I've known her for 30 years...
Perhaps a good sign that he's now over here, but Stephen, Mike, we're going to get back to you a bit later in the show. For now, we're going to be coming up to speaking to the University of Bristol academic who won this landmark decision that he was discriminated against because of his anti-Zionist beliefs. You won't want to miss it. That's on next on Good Afternoon Britain.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Chris, what is the preferred way in which the police go about their business at the moment? There's these two strands of thinking. Evidence-based policing versus bobbies on the beat.
It's very, very difficult. The problem that police have got, basically, is that they're too thinly spread, and it's too much is expected of them. There's a long list, isn't it? Every month we hear police need to do more about this, police need to do more about that, and police do their best. They're overwhelmed with bureaucracy. I mean, when I was a young PC, if I took a shoplifter in, then I'd be in and out within an hour. You take a shoplifter in now, and you're doomed for the rest of your shift for 6 or 7 hours dealing with the bureaucracy. Police want to get back in those communities because community policing is really the core of policing. But such are the demands on their time at the moment, and the bureaucracy, and the fact that they are struggling now to retain experienced officers. People are hemorrhaging out of the police, and new recruits coming in haven't got that experience, and there's a good chance they may not stay anyway. So there's all sorts of problems. And for the Home Secretary to glibly say he wants more done, frankly, clearly shows that he's got no understanding of the pressure police are under, and of course the constant criticism that they face across the board. Very rarely do you actually hear of police officers getting praised for acts of bravery or acts of compassion. So there's a problem with morale in the police force, and clearly a problem with the Home Secretary, who needs to get out there and talk to officers on the front line who frankly are struggling. And last night, of course, was a graphic example.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, a university academic who was sacked after criticising Israel has successfully claimed that he was discriminated against for his anti-Zionist views.
Yes, Professor David Miller drew controversy during a lecture at Bristol University in 2019 when he said the Zionist movement was one of 5 pillars driving Islamophobia in the UK.
Professor Miller has successfully claimed he'd been unfairly dismissed on the grounds of religion or belief. And joining us now is Professor David Miller himself. And thank you so much for making the time for us this afternoon. Now, in a previous hour of this programme, we spoke to Gideon Falter, the chief executive of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. And he said that your views are extremist and that being anti-Zionist is denying the right to self-determination for the Jewish people. How do you respond?
Well, the court has determined that that's not the case, that actually that anti-Zionist views are standard anti-racist views. They're worthy of respect in a democratic society. And if you discriminate against anyone who has anti-Zionist views as a result of those views, that you will be committing an offence and it will be illegal for you to do that and they will get compensation. It's a very clear message to organisations like Gideon's that they have lost the argument and that they were set up, in fact, to police the boundaries of debate on Israel and Palestine, and not, of course, to deal with the question of racism against the Jews, which in this country is pretty minimal.
Professor, did not the tribunal also find that some of your statements were irresponsible and ill-considered? And also, isn't it the case that the threshold as to what constitutes a philosophical belief is quite low and extends to veganism?
Well, you say it's low. That's a matter for debate, of course. The question, the threshold is, are views which are worthy of respect akin to Nazism? And if they're akin to Nazism, they're not worthy of respect. So it's quite clear that my views are not akin to Nazism. They're not racist. They're anti-racist. And therefore, they are worthy of respect in a democratic society. The court did make some statements about the things that I had said. And in particular, this was partly to do with the university's view that I should have gone through internal procedures in order to deal with the issues that I had. I did go through the internal procedures and they were blocked to me. It was made impossible for me to do that. And that's why I had to go public. So although the court has said that, that's correct. I would reject that. But I would want you to instead focus on the headlines, which is that I was found to have been wrongfully dismissed, and also I was found to have been dismissed as a matter of direct discrimination because of my anti-Zionism, which is contrary to what the university had themselves said.
David, is it not, though, that you've made quite a number of quite nasty comments, and the Union of Jewish Students at the university have clearly been very upset by them? I saw a tweet you tweeted that the facts are Jews are not discriminated against. They are overrepresented in Europe, North America and Latin America in positions of cultural, economic and political power. They are therefore in a position to discriminate against actually marginalised groups. Are you not indulging in very widely considered anti-Semitic tropes there? I could go on. There are many examples of this.
No, of course not. Of course not. No, the position is that Jews are the most advantaged economic minority in the country, and the data for that comes from the government and from the Equalities and Human Rights Commission. And that is the key question is that the Zionists say that the Jews are facing unparalleled amounts of racism and discrimination, and the truth is that they're not.
Well, hang on, let's look at the hate crime stats. Hate crimes against Jewish people in this country have skyrocketed.
So in the single example that you can point to, which shows that the Jews have faced any kind of problems in the society, are hate crime stats, where on average, per person, Jews are more likely to face hate crime than any other minority. And the reason for that is that the statistics are compiled in such a way that pro-Palestine activities like, for example, flying a Palestinian flag or using the phrase from the river to the sea are counted as being hate crimes. Now,
that's quite an accusation.
David,
it's quite an accusation, yes, and it's also true.
Do you understand, David, why some people might recoil when you say that Jewish people aren't discriminated against because Jewish people are so rich? Do you not see how that sort of is following that age-old anti-Semitic trope that you can't discriminate against a group because they're perceived to be in a position of authority? Surely that in itself could be seen as anti-Semitic.
Well, it is.
Well, if I'd said that Jewish people were rich, that would have been. I didn't say that. It's a question of averages and statistics, which are perfectly available to everyone who cares to look. This is not a question of anti-Jewish tropes. It's a question of saying, well, how is it that the Zionist views are able to maintain such a stranglehold on, for example, the media? The top 100 journalists in this country, around 12 or 13 of them are Jewish. All of them are Zionists. And in the case of your organisation, for example, one of your directors was a former director of the Campaign Against Antisemitism, the organisation you've just had on denouncing me. So that is an indication of the way in which the Jews are 0.5% of the population in the UK, and yet 13% of the top journalists.
Well, that sounds like a fantastic success story to me. One of the things you said, which really concerned me, was that Jewish students on British campuses are being used as political pawns by a violent, racist foreign regime engaged in ethnic cleansing, of course referring to the state of Israel. To suggest Jewish students are being used as political pawns, to me, that seems an outrageously extreme thing to say.
Well, it might do to you. The court didn't think so. I mean, the question, the statement I made was that there's a real question about whether some Jewish students, i.e. the leadership of the Zionist student organisations, are being used as political pawns. I was being polite. Actually, of course, we've seen since then that the people who were attacking me were involved directly in coordinating with the State of Israel. And what I was doing was being polite and giving them the benefit of the doubt, thinking that they might possibly not know what they were doing. But as, of course, in retrospect, they knew perfectly well what they were doing, as has been shown by their record of activities in going to Israel. So, I mean, these are not the extremist ideas. These are ideas which are taken by the court and determined to be acceptable in a democratic society, and that's the judgment of the court.
David, one of your other hats is, of course, working for Press TV, the Iranian state-owned media company. Of course, Iran has an extremist regime that's fairly widely considered, and indeed the state of Iran pursues and funds deeply anti-Semitic groups. Are you comfortable working for Press TV?
Well, if you look at the record of the deeply anti-Semitic groups that they're said to fund, if you Google this, you'll find that the organisations they're said to fund, which are deeply anti-Semitic, is the organisation, the television programme for which I work. I mean, this is a joke of an assertion done by the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, a Zionist organisation, and the ADL in the US, an organisation which is also a Zionist organisation. And the research that it's based on is frankly ridiculous.
Thank you very much for your time, Professor David Miller there. We must now go to a break.
But much more to come up.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yep.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially, just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 6th of February.
Prince Harry comes home. The Duke of Sussex has arrived in the UK to see his father after the King was diagnosed with a form of cancer. Could we see Harry brought back into the fold?
Manhunt Day 6. Abdullah Zaidi still eludes police capture almost a week after his vicious chemical attack in South London. The last time the have-a-go Christian was seen was January the 31st. But is he even still alive?
And PopCon at the ready. Former Prime Minister Liz Truss, along with other senior Conservatives, has launched today a new campaign group for lower taxes, less regulation, an end to what they call net zero zealotry and robust control of our borders. But is anyone listening?
Now, for those of you who were with us at the end of the last hour, we had a pretty ballsy interview, a pretty back and forth, pretty strident ping-pong, ding-dong, with David Miller, the university professor, the former university professor who was sacked after he says he made anti-Zionist comments. I thought it was a really interesting interview, actually.
Yeah, very interesting. It's always good to put people's words back to them and see how they justify them, particularly his assumption that Jews are not discriminated against because they are in good positions in society.
It's
I mean,
really
one would say
difficult
that being successful is a good thing in this society. I mean, that is the most anti-Semitic trope, in my view.
Yeah, I know. It's an age-old anti-Semitic trope, isn't it, that Jewish people are rich and powerful and therefore they can't be discriminated against. But it's a tricky one because we did debate about talking about this on the show, but this is a free speech station. We should hear all views, and I think it's a really interesting question about whether views that are perhaps deeply upsetting should be being aired at all. But I think on balance it was right to have that conversation, and I think the audience, I think you at home will be able to make up your mind for yourself about that conversation.
Yes, and this case may set a precedent for the future, and it's very important as well. We spoke to a campaigner against anti-Semitism at the start of the show, and it's certainly the case that many Jewish students haven't felt safe on campuses in recent times, and it's worth highlighting that, in my view. Let us know what you think, gbviews@gbnews.com, but let's get your headlines.
Tom, Emily, thank you very much, and good afternoon from the newsroom. It's 2 o'clock. As we've been hearing, Prince Harry has now touched down in London to see the King as he undergoes treatment for an unspecified form of cancer. It's unclear whether the Prince will meet with his brother, the Prince of Wales, who's expected to carry out some of his father's royal duties in coming weeks. The King reportedly told his sons about his diagnosis before Buckingham Palace made the announcement. Palace officials hope the news encourages others who were affected by the illness. Meanwhile, members of the public have shared their best wishes for the King with GB News.
The fact that he was already in hospital and he'd had obviously the enlarged prostate, and I understand from reading the news this morning it's not the prostate that's worried about, it's another form of cancer. But the fact that it's been caught mega early, you know, hopefully he should be fine, fingers crossed.
I just think it's sad. It's the same as any family. If someone gets that sort of news, obviously it's going to be devastating. But I suppose he's handling it pretty well at first.
It's so sad, really, with the loss of the Queen not too long ago. Now he's having cancer. Yeah, it's a sad time.
Police say it's highly likely there are people who know the whereabouts of the man suspected in a recent chemical attack, who've chosen, they say, not to come forward. Abdullah Zaidi is still wanted in connection with the attack that left a woman critically injured in South London. She's now in danger of losing her eyesight in her right eye. A £20,000 reward is in place for anyone with information that could lead to Zaidi's arrest. And police are warning anyone found to have assisted the suspect will face arrest also. Zaidi was last seen leaving Tower Hill Tube Station in East London just after 9:30 last Wednesday evening. They're also urging anyone with information to come forward. Liz Truss has said that democracy has become unpopular. That's as she unveiled a new group aimed at boosting Conservative ideas. The Popular Conservative Movement, or PopCon, aims to take on what the former Prime Minister called left-wing extremists. The Liberal Democrats have accused some of those who were present at today's launch of economic vandalism. But Ms Truss told GB News earlier she thinks left-wing ideas have gone too far.
One of the problems we have is, though we've got a Conservative government, what we're seeing in our schools, in our universities, in our corporate sector is the spreading of wokery, of left-wing ideas. The people of Britain want us to deal with the real issues. Immigration's too high, the government's too big, taxes are too high. But what we constantly hear is the left. So PopCon is about challenging that. It's about challenging the left-wing orthodoxy and making it positive to be a Conservative.
A 46-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of malicious communication following reports of an abusive and threatening phone call to a Conservative MP's office. Mike Freer announced his decision to quit politics last week. He told GB News that that's because he fears for his safety. The Justice Minister has been the target of several death threats and an arson attack on his constituency office. Around 8 million people will receive the last of 3 cost of living payments starting from today. The money will be paid by the Department for Work and Pensions, paid directly into bank accounts, and those who are eligible don't need to apply. It's the third of up to 3 payments, totalling up to £900 for some households on means-tested benefits. It's being given to alleviate the cost of living pressures. Labour has accused Downing Street of leaving the financial crisis in local councils for the next government to solve. Clive Betts, who's the Labour chairman of the Levelling Up Committee, is warning that many people will see a rise in rates as councils look to plug their funding gaps. That's after more than a decade of warnings over financial pressures which have put vital services in councils under severe strain. And finally, some political news to sink your teeth into. A set of dentures once worn by Winston Churchill are now up for auction. The false teeth were worn by the former Prime Minister during many of his most famous speeches, and they were designed to protect his natural lisp. They go under the hammer in Cheltenham today with an expected price of around £8,000. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 7 minutes past 2 and Prince Harry has arrived in the UK to visit his father after yesterday evening's shock announcement that the King has a form of cancer.
Yes, whilst the Duke of Sussex has travelled without his wife and children, it is hoped his return to the UK could be the first step towards a reconciliation between Harry and his family.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer were very quick to send the King their best wishes.
Yes, the Prime Minister of Canada as well, and Australia, where the King is head of state, are amongst countless world leaders to wish His Majesty a speedy recovery.
We can go live now to Buckingham Palace and speak to GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Cameron, we now know that Prince Harry is in London. What do you think he will be saying to the King when they meet?
Yes, Tom, well, it appears Prince Harry has indeed landed in London. At the moment, it looks like he has not arrived at Clarence House, which is where His Majesty the King is staying. He could well be heading to Windsor first to perhaps freshen up before he goes to meet His Majesty the King. We don't have any official confirmation, indeed, that he is going straight to see his father. But, of course, when he does, is going to be the first meeting in a number of months. The last time he saw His Majesty would have been during the coronation in May 2023, but they didn't actually speak on that day. Prince Harry, as soon as the ceremony at Westminster Abbey had finished, flew straight back to Los Angeles to spend time with Prince Archie, his son, on his birthday. Of course, they have not been on the best of terms over the last few years because we've had the bombshell memoir Spare. We've also had the Netflix series, but there certainly is, it appears, a bond between Harry and his father. We know that they spoke on the phone to mark King Charles's 75th birthday back in November. It was confirmed to me via a source close to Prince Harry. But when it comes to meeting in person, what's going to say, we don't know exactly, of course, but when it comes to Prince William and Prince Harry's relationship, that is a different matter. Their relationship is on even worse terms, as we understand it, from his father. There's no plans yet, or we haven't been told from either Kensington Palace or sources close to the Sussexes, if there are plans for Prince William and Prince Harry to meet during this time. But of course, this is all happening because King Charles has been diagnosed with what Buckingham Palace describes as a form of cancer, not prostate cancer. It was discovered during the treatment he had for an enlarged prostate for that benign condition a couple of weeks ago. But clearly it's a serious condition because Prince Harry has decided to fly across the Atlantic to see his father, bearing in mind he's expected to be in Whistler in Canada next week to launch his 2025 Invictus campaign. So it really is an unexpected visit from Prince Harry, but highlights the seriousness of the situation.
It'll be interesting to see how long he stays, because usually in recent years anyway, usually when he flies into London, he doesn't stay for very long. Perhaps he'll stay for a little longer this time, or is that wishful thinking?
We'll have to wait and see. Buckingham Palace has always stressed that King Charles very much loves his son, and I suppose it depends on how King Charles's recovery goes. Yesterday, we know King Charles had his first bout of treatment for this cancer. He's being treated as an outpatient in hospital, but I think it's quite difficult to speculate as to exactly how long Prince Harry is going to be staying in the UK. You could say how long is a piece of string. We do know he is scheduled to be in Canada, as I said, next week for the Invictus Games launch. Whether he is postponing that or he still plans to go, that has not been confirmed by Archwell, his communications team, so we'll have to wait and see. But of course, we know that King Charles has a long recovery ahead from this treatment. He's not going to be seeing in public for some time. Buckingham Palace has not confirmed how long he'll be out of action, but he is still very much continuing with work behind the scenes, and perhaps we'll get some family visitors along the way.
Well, really interesting stuff there, Cameron Walker. We know you'll be back on our screens as soon as we know more about Prince Harry and his travels through London. But for now, thanks for joining us.
Yes, let's get more now with the former royal correspondent at The Sun, Charles Ray. Charles, of course, we all heard the bad news yesterday evening about King Charles and his diagnosis with a form of cancer. We now know that Prince Harry, his son, has arrived in London and is on his way to Clarence House to see the King. How do you expect that interaction to go? It's been a tricky few years.
I expect that the fact that Harry's jumped on a plane is fantastic, to be perfectly honest, given what's going on in the last few years. And I think it's only right that Harry came across, and I'm sure that it would be a nice little tonic for the King. However, I can't help feeling that if Meghan had come along as well with the grandchildren, and remember the King has not met Lilibet yet, that would have been a double tonic. But she's decided to stay with the kids, and there may be perfect reasons why she hasn't come across. But I think the meeting with the King will go very, very well.
Do you really think that it would be a tonic for Meghan to come across? Perhaps they've had these sort of discussions in California and decided it might not be the most comforting thing at this point in time for the King to see Meghan.
Well, I think it's more important that he would see his grandchildren. And you were discussing grandchildren earlier on with Stephen and Mike Parry, Stephen Pound and Mike Parry. And, you know, grandchildren do bring an awful lot of, love into your life, especially at moments where you are in a sort of desperate situation. If you've been just diagnosed with cancer, what a better way to do it than to sort of have your grandchildren there that you have, certainly one of them you haven't actually met. I'm one of the people who believes that Meghan will never set foot into this country again, but it would have still been nice for her to come along with Harry and to say to the King, I hope you really get better soon, here are the kids.
Yes, I wonder why Harry didn't bring Lilibet with him. If the King hasn't even met her, you say?
No, he hasn't, and it would have been a perfect time, to bring her across. But there may be reasons why the children can't travel.
Yeah, there may be reasons.
I don't know. I just think that what's more important: the King fighting cancer or the kids going to school. I just think it might have been a better use of their time to come across and wish the King all the best, even though they're so young.
Now, Charles, from your years on the royal beat at The Sun, what do you understand about how much the Prime Minister will have been told about the King's condition, about at what point along the process the King discovered this, whether this is an early diagnosis or not? Because there was some confusion this morning when the Prime Minister revealed perhaps some more about the King's condition than Buckingham Palace had revealed last night.
Good question.
Yes, it may well be that the Prime Minister knows a little bit more than the rest of us. I mean, he may know just a bit less than the rest of the family know, but he may know more than we know as well. And it was interesting the way he came out this morning and said it's caught, the cancer's been caught early, and there's every good bit of news for his future diagnosis. So that looks to me as a positive sign. Let's not forget, cancer, it doesn't matter what type of cancer you got, it's a very serious condition. And any doctor, you've had doctors on screen, and other doctors have said, the earlier you catch a cancer, the more chance you have of surviving it and it being cured. So, let's hope that the King is in that bracket.
Yes, and I'm sure he's absolutely itching to get back to all of his public engagements. I say again, 516 he had last year, 94 of which were abroad, which I found astounding. Thank you very much indeed, Charles Ray, former royal correspondent at The Sun. Always great to speak to you.
Well, social housing tenants in Pembroke House in Salisbury have been living in fear after their housing association demanded a large hike in weekly repayments.
Yes, so the block, comprising of 38 flats, is home to many elderly people living on housing benefits.
Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor, has this special report with On the Money.
James Monroe will soon be 80. He lives alone, is diabetic, and at night needs a breathing machine to survive. Ill for much of his working life, James is reliant on subsidised social housing, his flat owned by Stonewater, a not-for-profit housing association. Stonewater last year wrote to dozens of tenants in James's block, demanding a 63% rise in accommodation costs.
That is what I wrote when it all happened. We didn't believe it. There were people walking around looking lost. There was no explanation. There was no warning. One or two hinted that there were going to be increases.
But 63%?
It's unaffordable.
A typical tenant in James's building, Pembroke House, faced a weekly rent rise from £166 to £271.20. That's 63% more, an extra £5,260 a year. While accommodation costs were around 11% higher, Stonewater justified the bulk of the increase by referring to higher energy and electricity prices, for which tenants, crucially, can't claim extra housing benefit.
Never felt lonely there.
Long-time Pembroke House resident Jenny Fiddler was, in her words, so petrified by this huge rent rise, she moved to more cramped housing elsewhere, away from her friends. Jenny was forced to give away most of her furniture, as her new accommodation away from numerous friends is much smaller. This 78-year-old widow says news of Stonewater's sudden rent hike made her cry and cry.
Devastating. I tell you now, and not many people know this, I had a complete mental breakdown. So don't go any further. Hurt. But I'm getting over it now. I'm surviving. But it's hard. Hard at my age.
Officials at Wiltshire Council are angry at how Stonewater is treating its tenants in Salisbury. One of the larger housing associations, Stonewater manages 36,000 homes across Britain, turning over hundreds of millions of pounds. The leader of Wiltshire Council says he was absolutely furious at Stonewater's 63% rent increase at Pembroke House.
I think that they're not behaving like a social landlord. They're a charitable organisation. They exist to provide a safety net, to have a social purpose. And instead, they and many other large housing associations are increasingly behaving like developers. They're not focusing on the people we're there to look after.
And the top people pay themselves quite a lot of money as well.
They certainly do. You're looking at something pushing $300,000 for the chief execs of these organisations.
In the not-for-profit sector?
Absolutely, yes.
Stonewater told us this. We understand customers' concerns about the increases in rent and service charges last year and have a wide range of support in place for anyone struggling. We've been working with customers across all our schemes to reduce energy use, which makes up the bulk of service charges. James and some other Pembroke House tenants are appealing Stonewater's price rises. They face an uncertain future, worried about the roof above their heads. Liam Halligan, GB News in Salisbury.
63% cost hike. Oof.
Although quite a few people in private rented accommodation have experienced similar in the last few years as well. Severe housing shortage. But you can read more on Stonewater Housing Association's full statement regarding this. That's now on GB News Online.
Yes, GBNews.com, of course, is the website. But coming up, former Prime Minister Liz Truss launches the popular conservatism movement, PopCon. But we're asking, is she the right person to front that particular movement? This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Marnie says being sexy in business is entirely possible and maybe even better.
Well, Marnie, this is something I say is true. I've had to live with this for quite a long time, and I think you can do both. Like, tell me, it's lovely to see you first of all.
Thank you for having me.
In all your gorgeousness. And you're telling me that often is regarded as something derogatory or something to hold you back. Is that right?
It's just this really unfair thing, this really unfair narrative that women can't do both. Even men can do it. As you know, Eamon, you can do it. You can do it all. And I just think, you know, women are so multifaceted. They can be mothers, they can be sexy, they can be businesswomen, they can be silly, they can be all these different dimensions. And this press push that we have to limit ourselves to one category, it's just unfair.
But do you think that is where some people may be wrong-footed or go wrong to underestimate you?
Exactly. There is that saying, disarm with charm. So, you know, that there is that idea that people do look at someone who cares about how they look, who's perhaps a bit feminine, and underestimate them. But hopefully I've proved that wasn't the case in the boardroom.
And thank goodness for Karen Brady. She's definitely upped the glam stakes on the show. And if anybody can prove that you can be sexy and successful in business, I suppose it's her, really. But where do you think most of the criticism comes from? Because I have to say, hard to believe, but when I was younger, I certainly got a bit of this at my old employer, being told that I had to dress a certain way, not to be too sexy, which I found hugely
you were told this by women.
I was told this by a female boss who didn't like me wearing zips on the back of my dress. Not just me, but some of the other presenters there. And I took such offence. I felt like she thought that I was some sort of, I don't know what. Do you take offence when people are criticising you, that, you know, in some way they think you're, I don't know?
There's just no right answer. And as we said, I think Karen Brady is doing an excellent job at leading the charge that you can be glamorous and get the job done.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. 23 minutes past 2, and former Prime Minister Liz Truss has today been launching her popular conservatism movement, aimed at restoring democratic accountability and promoting free market conservatism.
Yes, it comes as new polling reveals Liz Truss is by far the most unpopular politician with the British public, with one political researcher adding that it is ironic that popular conservatism couldn't find a more unpopular spokesperson if they actively tried. Well, is he right? Is he right, or do you actually take a different view when it comes to Liz Truss? Was she the one that got away too soon? Let's get more on this now with GB News political editor Christopher Hope. Christopher, big day for Liz Truss and the crew. You are now with Tobias Elwood, I hear.
That's right, yes. So just before we get to Tobias Ellwood, let's remind our viewers what Liz Truss had to say earlier at the launch of this popular Conservatism event.
The problems we have, as though we've got a Conservative government, what we're seeing in our schools, in our universities, in our corporate sector is the spreading of wokery, of left-wing ideas. And what PopCon is about combating that. Because the people of Britain want us to deal with the real issues. Immigration's too high, the government's too big, taxes are too high. But what we constantly hear is the left. So PopCon is about challenging that. It's about challenging the left-wing orthodoxy.
That's Liz Truss there talking to me earlier before she spoke at the PopCon event. You might find it interesting how little you can do in government, by the way, because there she's talking as a former Prime Minister and how impotent she felt against what she would see as this left biased in the establishment. But with me now is Tobias Ellwood from the centre of the party. Tobias Ellwood, you weren't at this PopCon event. Why is your party doing this? And isn't it confusing to voters to see another group being formed?
Absolutely. It's been a difficult couple of years. You know it, I know it, but we're starting to navigate into a far better place thanks to Rishi Sunak's leadership. Fiscal discipline has returned, calmer waters, we're looking ahead. Statecraft has returned as well to Whitehall as we get involved with what's going on in the Middle East and Ukraine and so forth. And yet here we have yet another formation of a group, another People's Front of Judea. This is very confusing to the electorate at a time when they want to see discipline, they want to see unity, they want to see a sense of purpose. And at the moment, they're not actually sure what Labour stands for. We don't give them the opportunity because yet another sub-tribe is formed. But there's another concern here that I have, which is look at the bigger picture. Authoritarianism is on the rise across the world. Britain is looked at as an exemplar of what democracy should be all about, what transparency should be all about. And yet here we have a group or a series of groups wanting to introduce populism. We saw what that happened in the United States. It can't happen here.
But doesn't PopCons exist for the right of the party because the right-wingers have been purged from the top of the government? Suella Braverman and the rest, these right-wing Tories, they look at their government, they don't really recognise many people from their persuasion in it, so they've formed the PopCons to do that for them.
Yeah, and this is the problem of where we're heading, is because I can tell you the message, build on your hate, and that can rile you up, get your anger going, and then you'll vote for me. But is it going to take the country anywhere? No, it won't. We've seen that in other parts of the world. We don't want that to happen here. And the reason why it might happen is simply because of how we select our leader. It's given to the power of the base. That's the membership chooses that. And I'm advocating that that must change. That decision as to who leads the party must be returned to parliamentarians. If you did that, you wouldn't have these groups trying to schmooze our base with these populist policies, which I'm afraid would not survive contact with reality. That's what needs to change.
I'm not sure your idea would survive contact with reality. You're going to take away the grassroots.
Change. It will change, whether it happens now or indeed later. Because if it doesn't happen, what we'll see is our party fragment between the light blue and the dark blue. Worst case scenario, we'll see Nigel Farage ending up as leader of our party because our base will like that. Now look at how successful leaders in the past. Go back to Disraeli, Churchill, Baldwin, Thatcher. They're the ones that embraced both sides of the party. They're the ones that actually ignored populism. They're the ones that approached a one nation approach. Look to our base, but look beyond our base. It's the centre of British politics. That's where the votes are. You go to your extremes, just like with Jeremy Corbyn on the left, you're never going to get elected.
But if you cut out members from choosing your next leader, how does that even make sense? Why would people want to campaign for you in elections?
Really important question. And membership is important, from the grassroots, delivering leaflets, helping with local council elections. They need to be participating in that. Perhaps they choose 4 or 5 candidates, but we choose the final 1 or 2. That's the way that it needs to go through. Flip the system as it is now around so MPs have the final decision.
Are you saying this because someone like you with a centre-left view on politics would never win because the base is to the right of you? Is that why you're saying this?
Nothing to do with me. This is about whether or not the Conservative Party is going to exist in the future. If we move to the extreme right, we will actually move ourselves out of British politics. The most successful parliamentary party in the world will move itself into oblivion if we continue down this right-wing approach.
The idea of this PopCon event, to go back this morning, is about ending, Davos man. That was Jacob Rees-Mogg said the age of Davos man is over. They want to try and give people more control over their lives, almost carrying on that Brexit revolution from 2016. Do you understand the feeling why people feel impotent? They feel that net zero isn't going to work for them. It's more taxation on them.
Understanding important points to be raised, but the next general election is months away. Is this going to help us having discord in the party? Is this going to help us seeing another grouping pursue a different agenda? Let's get behind the Prime Minister. That's the only chance we have of winning this election.
Well, there you have it. Tobias Ellwood fired up on a Tuesday afternoon as a man who was not invited to the PopCon launch today.
I'm not sure he would have received the invitation well anyway. But thank you very much, Christopher. Strong stuff from Tobias Ellwood there.
Really fascinating. Impassioned, fired up, as Christopher Hope said. What do you think? Should the next Tory leader only be decided by MPs rather than party members? GBviews at gbnews.com.
Liz Truss is very much dividing the inbox, isn't she? Judy says, I've been in laughter at the irony of Liz Truss leading the PopCon, given how unpopular she is. But others are saying it was a wonderful speech. She's the type of Conservative we need more of, and I'd vote for Liz Truss tomorrow, says Michael in Kingston upon Hull. So there you go.
Well, some exciting news for you now. We're going to be back to Buckingham Palace as Prince Harry lands in the UK to be the first to be with his father. But before all of that, we'll get to the headlines.
Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 2:30. The top story this afternoon and the latest developments, in fact. The royal helicopter has now been spotted landing at Buckingham Palace. That's as the King prepares his treatment for an unspecified form of cancer. Earlier, Prince Harry flew into London from Los Angeles after an overnight flight. It's unclear whether he'll meet with his brother, the Prince of Wales, who's expected to carry out some of his father's royal duties in coming weeks. The King reportedly told his sons about his diagnosis before Buckingham Palace made the announcement last night. Palace officials are hoping that the news will encourage others who are also affected by the illness. A £20,000 reward is being offered for anyone with information on the whereabouts of a man being hunted in connection with a chemical attack in South London. Abdullah Zaidi is suspected of attacking a woman with a corrosive substance. That's left her with potentially life-changing injuries. Police are warning that anyone found to have assisted the suspect will face arrest. Zaidi was last seen leaving Tower Hill Tube Station in East London just after 9:30 on Wednesday evening last week. Liz Truss has said the democracy has become unpopular as she unveiled a new group aimed at boosting Conservative ideas. The Popular Conservatives Movement, or PopCon, aims to take on what the former Prime Minister called left-wing extremists. The Liberal Democrats, though, have accused some of those who were present today at that launch of economic vandalism. Ms Truss told GB News she thinks left-wing ideas have gone too far. And Labour has accused Downing Street of leaving the financial crisis in local councils for the next government to solve. Clive Betts, who's the Labour chairman of the Levelling Up Committee, is warning that many people will see a rise in rates as councils look to plug funding gaps. That's after more than a decade of warnings over financial pressures in local councils, which have put their vital services under severe strain. And for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Ken, do you find the Union flag, the Union Jack, divisive?
In some situation, but as Simon quite clearly stated, and I agree with everything that he says in regards that there's situation when people use it for ulterior motive to cause fear, alarm and distress. We saw that with the far right when they came up to saying protecting the Churchill statues and things of that nature. But largely on the large whole, even I wave the St. George's flag on a sporting occasion. And I don't see anything wrong in raising the Union Jack or the St. George's flag so long as the intention is correct. And as he says, Mr. Brockhurst, he served for the country and he should have every right to be proud of what he's done and the way that he wants to display it.
All right, Simon, what do you make of this kind of, I would argue it as like student social media-based politics, where you get these pillocks from the Green Party or whatever saying, oh, it's divisive and I can't believe it. It will be legal in this country to do... Do those people need to get out more? I was on the streets of Stratford earlier on, an incredibly diverse place, speaking to a massive range of people right across different age demographics. I couldn't find a single sausage who said to me that they thought that this guy from the Green Party was right.
He obviously has absolutely no attention from anybody, and this is his way of finding attention. Both Ken and myself, we both agree that nobody should use any symbol of national identity to offend others deliberately, because that's just inflaming a situation. There's so much sensitivity around so many things today, and people do get offended by so much so quickly without any rhyme or reason.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 36 minutes past 2, and let's go live to Buckingham Palace now and speak to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Cameron, I hear there's been some activity at the palace.
Yeah, there certainly is, Tom. It's been pretty loud here in central London in the last few minutes because the King's helicopter has just landed in the garden of Buckingham Palace. Now, we don't know who was in that helicopter, if indeed anybody. It could well be, as has been reported by some journalists. The King is planning to leave London and return to Sandringham following his outpatient hospital treatment yesterday. As we've been reporting all day now, the King has been diagnosed with a form of cancer and was receiving his treatment yesterday in central London. He spent the night at Clarence House, and we do not have confirmation yet if he is indeed returning on that helicopter from London back to Sandringham. If we do get those details confirmed, we will bring them straight to you. In other developments, a motorcade has been pictured at Heathrow Airport, which has been widely assumed to be carrying Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex. We know that he is returning from California to the United Kingdom to spend time with his father following that cancer diagnosis. The King personally told his son Prince Harry and indeed Prince William and his siblings before that public announcement came out. We know that Queen Camilla has also been by her husband's side, King Charles. She's expected to continue with a full programme of engagements, but of course having a cancer diagnosis is pretty serious, and she is expected to play a very active role in supporting the King with his recovery from that disease. The King will be continuing with duties behind the scenes, as we've been saying, going through those government red boxing and, of course, meeting the Prime Minister weekly.
It is, of course, we will be back with you if we learn that the King is hopping on a helicopter, or anyone else for that matter.
You choked on a piece of popcorn there,
I might have done, because, and this is relevant to the show.
Yeah,
we're joined now by the former Labour MP Stephen Pound and broadcaster Mike Parry, and we're going to be discussing popcorn. This at the start of the show was a lot more full of popcorn, but why do I have popcorn, Emily?
Yes, because Liz Truss is telling the Conservatives how to be popular again. But the question is she the right person to lecture the party on how to be a good Conservative, a popular Conservative. Well, let's go to Mike. I'm interested on your views on this. Now, a lot of people will say Liz Truss, she messed it up a bit, but actually some of her ideas were pretty sound. What's your view?
Yeah, I think some of her ideas were sound, but she didn't have the political nous or ability to translate sound ideas into sound action. And in fact, smashed her own government up, smashed up a lot of the Tory party, and smashed up the ideals of some of the people who agreed with what she was saying. Which I think are irreversible. How could anybody now put any trust in Liz Truss? I don't think she's got a very good presentation style anyway. She always looks stuttering to me. She doesn't speak well, she's not a great lecturer, and I always feel like I'm talking to somebody who seems to be making it up on the hoof, you know, as the ideas are coming out of her head. But I think she caused so much chaos that is indicative of the Tory party. And she's created more chaos by launching another group. Is there now 5 breakaway right wings?
It is a bit much, actually.
Keep up, that was half an hour ago.
Exactly, Mike makes a good point, though, Stephen, doesn't he? Because she did damage the Conservative Party's prospects at the next election, wrongly or rightly, whatever your view. And I know that a lot of people are still supportive of Liz Truss and wish she was still Prime Minister, actually. But she did cause a lot of damage. And then to build this campaign group at a time where Rishi Sunak is struggling in the polls, is it self-serving, or do you think she genuinely believes that this is the type of campaign that can turn around the fate of the Conservative Party and the future of Britain?
With friends like that who need enemies, in perfectly honesty. Look, is it sour popcorn or is it sweet popcorn? Because, I mean...
It's salty.
It's salty. a salty and battery, by the sound. Look, the reality is, the Conservatives weren't always loved. They didn't have to be loved, but they had to be perceived as being competent and capable. They had to believe in sound economics, and they had to believe in actually consistency. And when we had Tobias Ellwood absolutely off on one on GBNews earlier on today, you know, talking about Baldwin, Disraeli, you know, what was the thing they all had in common? Thatcher, belief, consistency, capability, and competence. And that is why Keir Starmer will be pushing this. I am competent. I may be dull, but by God, I'm competent.
Well, we don't know if he's competent because he hasn't done anything yet.
I worked with him in Northern Ireland. That was, that was a difficult job, and he did it very well.
I also wonder whether Kwasi Kwarteng announcing that he's stepping down in the next election is in fact him putting the knife in as well.
Yeah, there's a reason he announced that today, right?
That's what I mean. So
of all days.
It's so catty, isn't it?
Well, it's not catty. He's clearly been harbouring hatred of some sort for the humiliation heaped upon him, called back from America. Remember the pictures of his plane at Heathrow pulling in? And when he gets off, he's sacked. Now,
I know everyone knew he was sacked before he knew he was sacked.
Yeah, he was sacked in mid-air, wasn't he? So I think he's been harbouring that resentment for quite a long time, and he's thought today, right, I'm not going to let you start, you know, with a high. You're going to start on a low because I was the Chancellor. You ruined my career. I'm going to try and put the boot in on you.
So it's all about egos, personality, and eye for an eye.
I'm sure it is. And for anybody now at this late stage to come up like Liz Truss and say, ha, 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 what did Baldrick used to say? I've got a cunning plan. It's a bit
hang on, perhaps they have
it's a bit late for the cunning plan.
Have some genuinely good ideas. A lot of people who used to support the Conservative Party and now don't are sick of over-regulation when it comes to net zero. They are sick of nanny state. They do want to see taxes lower, and they do want to see immigration down. That's what PopCon is saying.
Well, look, let's see what Liz Truss is actually saying. She's actually very, very good at saying what the problems are, but she's very, very poor at actually coming out with a prescription. What she did was she committed the absolute fundamental error of modern politics and of modern economics. Cut taxes and increase spending. You cannot reduce taxation and increase expenditure.
Of course, what Liz Truss would...
the economy.
Well, this is what Liz Truss would say in response to that, just a few weeks after that mini-budget, she was going to announce these supply-side reforms, where she was... I mean, the first of them was already voted for, allowing fracking in the UK. That would have generated a lot of money. Equally, there were so many more things when it came to planning reform, when it came to regulatory divergence from the European Union, all of these things. What a lot of economists say is that she did this the wrong way round. She should have announced the regulatory changes first and then cut the taxes later.
The easiest thing to have done would have been what Kemi Badenoch has done over the last couple of months, and that's scrap all these EU laws. Now, there were 4,000 and they were due to go. It seems 2,000 of them have already gone. I think the other problem that Liz Truss has created for the Tories is that when you come up on a stage like that and say, I'll tell you exactly what's wrong with the country, this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, she hasn't got time to put it right. She's just reminding the electorate how bad it all is and emphasising it, you know.
From the Labour perspective, which I'm allowed to intrude on occasionally, one thing that absolutely killed us was the fact that we had an alternative party called Momentum. It was a party within the party, and they had organising, they had their own leaflets and their own candidates, and the public took one look at that and said, we're not going to vote for a divided party. What we want is unity, coherence and competence. And I have to say, we made a ghastly, almost a catastrophic error.
And you think
Momentum.
the Conservative Party are sort of allowing in their own momentum
of course
in this PopCon?
There's no comparison, come on, between Momentum and this PopCon. I mean, PopCon are basically saying what the government is saying, but they're saying they need to do it more.
I don't get this divided party thing. Well, what I think is it's not a divided party, it's whether there's a strong enough leader, you see what I mean, to ignore the divisions in the party and get on with a, single view.
Mike Stephen, I have to say we are rapidly running out of PopCon.
But just a final word said that Disraeli, the Conservative Party, was an organised hypocrisy. The Labour Party is an amalgamation of different parties. We're all groups of people coming together for a party. We don't all believe in one thing.
Exactly.
But you don't then set up alternative parties, alternative groupings with badges and flags. And
Yes, it would be nice to think that our governing party was working for our best interest, in our best interest. But coming up,
I always worked in your
all
best
right,
interest.
Steve.
You'll be right back. You'll be right back after the ad break. So hold your horses. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be continuing these debates, and also, should we ban smartphones for under 16s? We'll be right back to that after this.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, we're right back with you with former Labour MP Stephen Pound and broadcaster Mike Parry. Shall we pick up where we left off? Things were getting rather jolly in the studio, but there is
heated, I'd say.
We've got an exclusive story from Stephen Pound that he would like to share about his exercise habits, actually, before we get on to the issue of banning smartphones.
Before we get into the issue.
Sorry, viewers are switching off all over the nation.
We have been talking about staying fit, about exercising. And Stephen Pound, when you first got elected to Parliament back in 1997, you had to visit the gym.
Well, no, there was a diktat that came down from the whip's office. Said, Tony Blair said, we're the servants now, and we've got to get fit for purpose. We've got to actually get out there and do it. And they sent us to the gym, and I went into the gym, which has been a lovely one, just quite close to Norman Shore South in those days.
Which is one of the buildings in Parliament.
Indeed, yeah, the old Scotland Yard building. Paddy Ashdown was leaping up and down, doing star jumps, and as only a member of the SBS, the Special Boat Squadron, can do. Anyway, they told us to run on this treadmill for half an hour. And I've been treadmill for half an hour. And after about 15... Now, I have to say, between you and me and 16 million viewers, I used to be a very, very heavy smoker. Very heavy smoker. And after about 20 minutes, I thought, oh, sod this for a lark, and I lit a fag up. And so...
on the treadmill in the parliamentary gym.
You had your cigarettes with you in the gym.
Anyway, and Ashdown comes across and starts giving me grief about it, as if it's somehow out of order. to torch up, to spark up a snout in the gym. I mean, how could he? And so I said to him, listen, mate, we know where you get your exercise.
Goodness me.
Do you know what? That is so funny, because if that happened now, I mean...
I'd be shot.
Well, there'd be a fire alarm for one.
Well, what a story. From one addiction to another. Should we ban smartphones for under 16s? It's been a big debate this week. It's been a big debate, actually, in the wake of the tragic case of Brianna Ghey and her killers, who were, perhaps some would say, radicalised on the dark web. But, Mike Parry, is this a problem of kids having smartphones, or is there something else going on there?
Look, you can't ban them, because parents want to be in touch with their children, don't they? And the only way you can do that is to make sure they've got a phone. What I don't understand is we have so much technology in the world which can guide missiles and everything else, and surely there must be a way of restricting the content of a phone. I mean, for years, for decades now, we've had a system on our televisions at home where parents can make sure children can't access certain material.
Oh, there is.
There are plenty of phones with parental controls. It's just parents aren't buying them.
Well, in that case, you've got to strengthen up the ability for parents to buy them. And also...
So how do you do that?
Well, there are devices which parents can control from their phone to their children's phone. Do you see what I mean? Now, the problem is, of course, children get smarter all the time, and they find ways of overriding those protective devices. Apparently, just having a look at it before, it can be something as silly as you putting the wrong date of birth into your phone to access stuff with no regulatory check against it. You see what I mean? But, I mean, surely things like fingerprints or face recognition or something like that must be able to be inserted into phones to stop kids from accessing...
We heard from Britain's strictest head teacher the other day, and she said that what parents should do is buy the old-fashioned brick phones, some of those ones that don't have access to Instagram and Twitter and social media, and basically only do text messages and phone calls.
That's right.
How little she then knows, about the modern mum and dad, because there's no way on God's green earth you're going to, send little Sebastian off with his brick Nokia. But look...
I had a beautiful brick Nokia.
Yeah, but that was retro.
When they were cool.
That's when everyone had a Nokia.
That was a classic, not an antique. But look, the United States Navy came out with a thing about 15 years ago called Tor, which stands for the onion ring, and it's an encryption process whereby the so-called dark web, the Silk Road, all that stuff. To access it, you have to go through all these different rings.
This is where you hire hitmen and buy illegal drugs.
Well, but you also, and I find it almost too painful to even say, to actually where you can see people being killed and tortured. And that's what these two people were watching. Now, the fact they got into that, you can ban phones from now till Christmas. It's not going to make a blind bit of difference because you've got to go after the people who are actually inserting and putting up that content. Now, you tell me, Mike talks about technology, and I agree. We've got to be able to track this back. You must
be able to.
Do you remember the snuff movies? When the idea about where people were actually being killed on and I thought that was a joke. I thought, not a joke, but I thought it was a myth. It turned out that there was a place in Mexico where they're actually filming people being killed. We've got to be able to track that. Surely there's no country in the world would actually defend the right to kill people and then broadcast it throughout the world. We've got to go to the source. Stop it, cut it out.
Is there an element of parental neglect or laziness sometimes that parents might just, pass the iPad to the child just to keep them busy for a while, not really knowing what they're looking at?
I think there's a degree of lack of parental will, because all parents will say to you, my child doesn't need it, don't worry. That's not my child. They always say that.
On that note, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. We've got to get across to Martin Daubney. Martin, what's coming up on your show?
Parents over shoulder.
OK, the prodigal son returns. Prince Harry has landed, but will he be welcome at King Charles's bedside? The left-wing extremists have taken over the country, according to Liz Truss. Is popular conservatism the answer, or do we need a populist revolution? Albanian people smuggler gets a risible 2 years for people smuggling, plus People Power Special, Bobby's on the beat, and Tidy Up Britain. That's all coming in after your latest weather forecast on the Martin Daubney Show.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin. Welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Some snow in the forecast tonight across parts of northern Scotland. Further south, it's rain we're contending with. This weather front, or set of weather fronts, is slipping southwards, bringing the outbreaks of rain, but also introducing colder air. It's been very windy and at times wintry in Shetland. The strong winds easing over northern Scotland, but another band of sleet and snow comes in through the night. It could turn icy as well, so we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place. Could easily be a covering of snow even at lower levels. Further south, it'll be rain that slips its way steadily across southern England and South Wales, keeping things above freezing here, but from northern England northwards, a pretty extensive frost, hence why it could be icy as we see that snow coming in, tending to fizzle out as it moves through the central belt. More snow showers coming into northern Scotland. Early rain on the south coast. Could be quite a grey morning here, but for many it's a fine, bright winter's day on Wednesday, and the winds will be lighter tomorrow as well. But it will be colder. Temperatures only 5 or 6 degrees for most places, maybe 8 or 9 further south, but that's a good few degrees lower than today. And then on Thursday, the wet weather pushes back further north as it hits the colder air. A greater risk of some significant snow in parts of North Wales, the northern parts of the Midlands, Northern England and Northern Ireland. We have another Met Office yellow warning for snow for Thursday. Do keep up to date with the forecast. See the warnings on the Met Office website.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, you know, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951,
years,
whatever
right.
it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, it's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. Top story today, Prince Harry has arrived in the UK to see King Charles after his cancer diagnosis. The prodigal son returns. The King's received support from across the world, of course, and I'll bring you messages from you, the GB News viewers and listeners who sent their touching messages to His Majesty. Next up, Liz Truss is back in the public eye. Today, the former Prime Minister has criticised Rishi Sunak's government for failing to take on what she's called left-wing extremists. Is this yet another plot to sink Sunak? And is Truss the answer? Next, as the latest on the manhunt for